Chapter 321. Caw. After a crisp sound, the cockpit door of number 4 Marine Gauda opened urgently. Kai. You bastard idiot. Why didn't you let me fuse with Marine Gauda? If you had done so earlier, this mech wouldn't have fallen to the point where it can no longer be started. As the cockpit door opened, a frantic voice came out from the cockpit. At the same time, a white shadow jumped out from inside and stared at the Tiger Special Type's thermal sword that cut through number 4 Marine Gauda's waist. This is a battle between humans. The cockpit door was ejected by emergency measures. Ray Minkai stood up from his seat and looked at the Tiger Special Type that had lost all its energy response. Human? Are you blind? Or do you not know? Was the performance of this mech just now the limit of what a human pilot can do? That was a particle beam with sublight speed. So what? Ray Minkai was unmoved and counterattacked. He even jumped out of the cockpit and tried to jump to the cockpit of the Tiger Special Type. However, because the hole that was melted by the beam sword happened to be near the cockpit, Ray Minkai had to give up this move. The White Cat State Zero, who was constantly scolding Ray Minkai's reckless behavior, suddenly froze and then roared even more angrily. Kai. You bastard! Do you know what kind of enemy we are going to face next? At this critical moment, you actually caused this Marine Gauda to be scrapped for your unnecessary knight's spirit. Don't you know that we don't have many mechs that we can use now? Ray Minkai frowned and glanced at the White Cat State Zero. Don't we still have you? Tusk Lion State Zero. Besides, even without this Marine Gauda, we still have the Lancelot. You! Ray Minkai's answer made the White Cat State Zero suddenly stunned. That towering rage was reduced by 3 notches. Ray Minkai ignored the speechless White Cat State Zero and returned to the cockpit. After taking out the communication headset, he connected to the communication channel of the 8th team. This is Ray Minkai. Can the 8th team hear me? This is Amada Shiro. 2nd Lieutenant, is it over on your side? Amada Shiro's voice sounded immediately. It seemed that he had been waiting on the communication channel for a long time. 2nd Lieutenant, I see that your side seems to have calmed down. And, although it was unexpected, it is still over. Now, the enemy's MS has stopped responding. However, my land fighter Gundam was severely damaged in the battle just now. At present, he no longer has the ability to continue fighting. After Ray Minkai's eyes glanced at the mech Dain. Is that so? Marine Gauda has lost the ability to continue fighting? I understand. 2nd Lieutenant, go over and meet up with Elidoya and the others. Leave the rest to us. Although Amada Shiro was distressed for the loss of the 4th Marine Gauda, he was also glad that Ray Minkai had survived the fierce battle. Yes. Start meeting up with Elidoya now. Ray Minkai replied and threw the headset back into the cockpit. The White Cat State Zero, who had gradually calmed down, looked at Ray Minkai and asked curiously, Aren't you going to meet up with them? No. Now it's time for reporter Ray Minkai to leave. State Zero, haven't you been muttering Miss Q's name? Then, let's go find trouble with this woman now. Ray Minkai jumped from the cockpit of the land fighter Gundam to the ruins of the collapsed building next to it. Hey, Kai. Wait for me. White Cat State Zero hurriedly followed. What White Cat State Zero did not expect was that Ray Minkai actually agreed to go find Miss Q. In the previous battle, Ray Minkai did not seem to care about the White Cat State Zero's request. This almost made the White Cat State Zero think that this guy definitely did not want to look for Miss Q. However, since Marine Gauda had lost his ability to fight, the only mechs that could be used were Lancelot and the Long Fong Lion State Zero. Compared to Lancelot, the existence of the Long Fong Lion State Zero was indeed somewhat unimaginable to the humans of this world. In order to not provoke unnecessary trouble before the final battle, the Long Fong Lion State Zero was temporarily shelved by Ray Minkai. Therefore, at this moment, the only mech that Ray Minkai could use was Lancelot. and it just so happened that Lancelot's excellent maneuverability became a sharp weapon at this moment in the mixed terrain of the city ruins, jungles, and mountains. In the jungles outside the city, in a corner unknown to the Federation army and John, a huge silver ball slowly emerged from the void and appeared in front of Ray Minkai and White Cat State Zero. Lancelot, activate. Under Ray Minkai's command, the huge silver ball immediately melted from top to bottom like snow in spring, revealing the mech that had been firmly wrapped and protected Lancelot. At this moment, Lancelot, who had accompanied Ray Minkai for a long time in battle, took the initiative to open the cockpit while the liquid metal wrapped around it melted, waiting for its master to drive it into battle again. Without hesitation, Ray Minkai's figure flashed and had already jumped into Lancelot's cockpit, and the White Cat State Zero followed closely behind. And this time, the White Cat State Zero did not stop, nor did it wait for Ray Minkai's permission. Instead, it directly integrated into Lancelot's system and directly used its ability, Function Fusion, merging with Lancelot. Perhaps this was because the White Cat State Zero was afraid that Ray Minkai would cause the previous thrilling scene again. Obviously, it could have suppressed the enemy with a stronger power, but because of some unnecessary emotions, it caused the destruction of Marine Gouda. Such reckless behavior made the White Cat State Zero, who had been wanting revenge since discovering the whereabouts of Miss Q, gnash its teeth in hatred. Let's go. Now, time waits for no one. As soon as Lancelot's cockpit closed, the White Cat State Zero, which had merged with Lancelot, immediately started Lancelot without any explanation. It plunged into the city, relying on the surrounding buildings for cover, and quickly went straight toward the mountain. Boom! 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 3 cannon shots were heard, indicating that the steel tank protected by the 8th team had finally successfully entered the firing position and began to fire at the original mission target. Looking at the steel tank continuously firing cannon shots on the screen, Amada Shiro suddenly had a strange feeling in his heart. However, Amada Shiro did not know where this strange feeling came from. He could only silently watch the steel tank beside him eliminate the targets that were already marked on the map. This battle should be over soon, right? Aina. Amada Shiro, who was thinking about this, did not know that in the depths of the mountain ahead, Aina, who he missed, was facing the situation now. What? Colonel Norris has already. Aina, who had changed into the pilot uniform, was stopped before she could board Apsara's. However, he was stopped by a female reporter who was still at her post. Miss Aina, it's Colonel Norris signal flare. What? Norris signal flare? What color? How is his situation? Ayane's heart flashed with an ominous feeling, and she quickly asked back. The female correspondent's face was sad, and her voice was filled with regret. Red. Aina was stunned, and immediately understood the meaning of this color. Unable to return to the rendezvous. Can Kai Ludgren take off as soon as possible? Thinking of this, Aina took a deep breath. She knew that even if Norris fired this signal flare, it did not mean that the Federation MS on the battlefield outside did not have the power to threaten Kai Ludgren. In the end, they still had to rely on the power of the demon above them, Apsara's power. Aina, get ready. Let's go. Now is the best time to fulfill your wish. At this moment, a voice that was always in a lazy state sounded. Miss Q. Aina turned around and saw that her brother, Kenya's, was standing beside Miss Q. However, Aina was confused. Why was there not a single technician beside her brother? Where's everyone in Apsara's? Aina asked. Maybe they're hiding there to celebrate. This was Kenya's answer. An answer that avoided the main point of Ayane's question. Aina frowned but did not probe further. She just turned around and walked toward Apsara's. Change into the pilot uniform. Brother. Go. Kenya's. I'll be by your side and watch you fulfill your wish. Under Miss Q's gaze, and under the protection of 2 flying tigers, the new Apsaras, under the joint piloting of Ina and Kineas, slowly rose to the open dome. It rose all the way along the crater until it appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Then, bursts of light appeared in front of the huge Mega particle cannon in front of Apsaras without any hesitation or concealment. That is? Apsaras, or rather, Apsaras III, was a behemoth that suddenly rose into the sky from the volcanic crater. The moment it appeared, Colonel Rhea and Senior Commander Kojima, who were standing on the bridge of the big Pallet-class gunship, were taken aback. This is Gion's secret weapon? What a huge body! Looking at it from afar, even without a concrete impression, one could tell how huge Apsaras III was from the size of the two flying tigers on both sides of Apsaras III. Colonel Rhea was silent. However, the Federation army was silent because of the appearance of Apsaras III, but it did not mean that Apsaras III would stop. Boom! With a flash of light, the light gathered at the front of Apsaras III's large-caliber Mega particle cannon suddenly erupted and shot out a seemingly small but actually extremely powerful beam of light. With a gentle sweep of the beam of light, it wiped out several MS teams that were deployed by the Mechanical Mixed Brigade at the foot of the mountain and on the mountainside. Rumble! Wherever the beam of light passed, it set off a series of violent explosions, thick smoke rose into the sky, and a monstrous fire spread throughout the jungle. At this moment it was like hell. Third, fourth, signal lost. Can't be contacted. In the bridge of the Pallet class, CIC stared blankly at the symbol representing the two teams that had lost contact. In just an instant, the two teams were annihilated without being able to put up any resistance. Such a huge disparity in combat power made everyone on the bridge gulp involuntarily. Calm down. Send out the sniper on Jim. Colonel Rhea, who had been gloomy all this time, spoke. It was finally time to reveal the trump card that he had been hiding until now. However, no one knew that in this final battle, a ghostly figure just happened to rush up the mountainside from the other side of the mountain and went straight to Apsaras III. Kai. The energy system that the big guy is using now is an energy institution that is developed with the fragment as the center. As long as the fragment is taken out of this energy institution, the big guy can no longer be activated, and there is no possibility of resurrection. White Cat Zero's voice sounded in the cockpit. Yes. Then, can you sense the existence of Miss Q? Ray Minkai nodded and asked while controlling Lancelot to move quickly in the jungle. Ray Minkai indeed felt the White Cat Zero's fear of Miss Q. However, Ray Minkai, who had lost the memories related to Soth's mechanical beast world, could not recall any information related to Miss Q. I can sense some. But there seems to be something interfering with my perception. Kai, as long as we take out Apsaras III, that woman will inevitably appear in front of us. White Cat Zero's voice was filled with regret, but it was not discouraged because of this. On the contrary, according to the image of Miss Q in its memory, White Cat Zero easily came up with a targeted strategy. So, we just have to take out Apsaras III? This mission is really difficult. Ray Minkai smiled lightly, but there was no timidity. On the hillside, Lancelot kept accelerating. On the other side, a dark green sniper Jim also walked out of the pallet-level Naku and connected to the energy pipeline connected to the warship reactor. Boom! 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 Suddenly, 3 cannons sounded from the city at the foot of the mountain. 6 cannonballs that tore through the air let out a burst of whistling sound and bombarded the top of Apsaras III's head. However, the moment a ray of light burst out from Apsaras III's large-caliber Mega particle cannon, the 6 cannonballs were instantly blown up. Its defense has increased. This shocking scene, in Ray Minkai's opinion, might be caused by the fragment. Moreover, Apsaras III, who had obtained the fragment, might have more power than expected. Chapter 322. The cannonballs continued to sweep across the sky. attacking Apsara's 3 that was slowly descending from the top of the mountain. However, they were all blown up in the air in the end. The strange and powerful beam of light made all the Federation soldiers who witnessed Apsara's 3 easily blow up the cannonballs fired by the steel tanks in the air could not help but swallow their saliva. What is this thing? How can it be to this extent? Colonel, we underestimated the strength of the Guion army here. Captain Xiao Dao's expression became more and more solemn. Colonel Rhea shook his head slightly but did not say anything. Perhaps Colonel Rhea's trump card had already been revealed, and that Sniper Jim might be one of the trump cards, but Colonel Rhea did not know how far it could go. Compared to everyone who was shocked by the amazing performance of Apsara's 3, Ray Minkai was a little more relaxed. Lancelot galloped in the dense jungle. His height of nearly 5 meters did not make Lancelot as eye-catching as Jia Gu, Lu Zhan, or Gouda. Instead, he was able to move freely in the jungle. Kai, should we take care of that big guy first? A flash of light passed by, and the figure of White Cat Zero was projected on the control panel. No. I think we should go inside the base and check out the situation first. Outside here, the 8th Squad will take care of it. Although Ray Minkai was a little worried about the existence of Apsara's 3, he felt that before dealing with Apsara's 3, it was necessary to find out who was hiding behind the scenes. Hearing Ray Minkai's decision, White Cat Zero was silent. In its heart, Apsara's 3, no, it should be the existence of the fragment, had always been the top priority. But now there was an additional option in front of it. An existence that White Cat Zero could not refuse and even wanted to kill immediately. Maybe, as long as we kill that big guy, that woman will run out. Even White Cat Zero did not have much confidence in these words. As the only existence with a clear memory of Miss Q, White Cat Zero naturally knew that this woman would definitely take action to protect herself when danger approached. If Lancelot rushed out and fought with Apsara's 3 now, Lancelot's body, which was obviously different from the MS-shaped body of this world, would inevitably attract the attention of the Federation army. Especially now when everyone's attention was on Apsara's 3, any mistake could cause unnecessary accidents. Good. This way. I can feel that woman's presence. After figuring out the key point, the White Cat, State Zero, who did not want to be entangled with trouble, immediately took action and pointed out a path to the target for Lei Minkai. However, when Lancelot found a path leading to the underground passage in the jungle, the huge gate blocking the entrance of the passage opened. It seems that the opponent has already discovered our existence. Ray Minkai's face was a little solemn. It seemed that Miss Q had already discovered their existence. Maybe it's the traces left by the battle between me and that broken humanoid robot. I originally thought that the opponent did not discover my existence. Now it seems that Miss Q may be casting a long line to catch a big fish. White Cat Zero raised its head slightly and looked at Ray Minkai. What should we do? Ray Minkai shook his head. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Since the opponent has already made it clear that they want to invite us in as guests, then we can only accompany them to the end. The radiation vibrasword hanging on both sides of the cockpit turned downward and was held in Lancelot's hands. In this narrow terrain, melee weapons were always much better than long-range weapons. Buzz! At the same time, Lancelot rushed into the deep passageway in the blink of an eye and rushed towards the depths of the underground base. Speaking of which, it was strange. Along the way, Ray Minkai did not discover anyone coming out to intercept Lancelot. Even White Cat Zero did not feel that there was an ambush on both sides of the passageway. Strange. Would Miss Q stay in the depths of the base and wait for death? White Cat Zero's eyes revealed a trace of doubt. According to its understanding of Miss Q, this woman would definitely not send herself to die so easily. Ray Minkai also had the same doubts, but he knew that as long as he followed the passageway that the opponent deliberately opened, the answer would inevitably be placed in front of him. However, The answer that was about to appear in front of him, what would it be? The deep passageway reverberated with the buzzing sound of the high-speed rotation of the guide wheel. The steel warrior with platinum paint and gorgeous royal patterns on his body rushed out like a storm from the depths of the passageway and landed steadily at the exit of the underground hangar. Beep beep. The infrared detector on Lancelot's chest popped out and instantly scanned the situation of the underground hangar. One person. From the scan results presented by the infrared detector, there was only one lone figure standing there in the huge underground hangar. Behind this lone figure was a huge battleship with a length of 255 meters, a height of 75 meters, and a width of 211.8 meters. This was John's only Zanzibar-class mobile cruiser that could break into the atmosphere for combat. Kailuj Serial? The appearance of this huge battleship allowed Ray Minkai to recognize its identity at first glance. At the same time, he also knew that this battleship was carrying the wounded and sick of John's remaining army, as well as many people who were about to evacuate the base. However, the lone figure standing beside Kailuj Serial caught Ray Minkai's attention. Miss Q. At this time, White Cat Zero's low roar contained anger and informed Ray Minkai of the identity of this lone figure. She is Miss Q. The screen in front of him changed, and the image of a tall woman with fiery red hair and purple pupils appeared in front of Ray Minkai. However, the moment this figure appeared, a storm broke out in Ray Minkai's mind, deeply stimulating the nerves in Ray Minkai's brain. At this moment, countless images flew out from some unknown corners of his mind. However, before Ray Minkai could react, they collapsed and turned into fragments that filled the sky. This abnormality did not last long, or rather, it only appeared in the blink of an eye. Even White Cat Zero, who was always paying attention to Ray Minkai, did not notice Ray Minkai's abnormality in time. Miss Q. In these broken memories, Ray Minkai found some information about the woman in front of him. At the same time, his tone was similar to White Cat Zero's, holding a deep hatred for her. However, the woman standing next to Kailuj Serial Pilot, also known as Miss Q, did not realize that the person and cat in the pilot cabin of the small humanoid mech that appeared in front of her had a deep hatred for her. What a surprise! Although I had speculated before, in the end, I still missed out on some factors. I didn't expect that there would be someone like me in this world. How interesting! The fiery red woman, also known as Miss Q, looked at Lancelot's slender figure with great interest, which was different from Jim, Gouda, and Jagu's appearance. As the mastermind behind the scenes who had harmed many worlds, Miss Q naturally connected the matter of her miniature AS Avenger being inexplicably killed the moment Lancelot appeared. Speaking of which, this was inevitable. In this world, there was no technology for miniaturized robot. Even the technical route of the miniaturized MS was still under debate. Therefore, from the beginning Miss Q determined that the Avenger was not destroyed by the humans of this world, but by someone who was also from another world. This mech seems to have been seen there before. The name I forgot. But it doesn't matter. Mr. Customer, although I don't know your name, I still have to give you a piece of advice. Casually destroying the fruits of other people's labor is not necessarily a praiseworthy thing to do. On the contrary, you are likely to attract the revenge of the owner. Miss Q's gaze was still looking at Lancelot, but her actions were not gentle. She raised her slender hand and waved it forward. Go, my little cutie. Say hello to the customer. Roar! A roar filled the entire underground hangar. Even if Ray Minkai turned off Lancelot's external sound capture device, he could still clearly hear the roar exploding instantly. This is? In the midst of the roar, a sharp claw suddenly pierced through the back of Miss Q's mech. In the last few seconds, the sharp claw that pierced through the back of Miss Q's mech suddenly exerted force and ruthlessly tore Miss Q's mech in half, revealing the sharp horns on its head, a pair of sharp claws, and 3 crescent-shaped sharp weapons at its tail. Its entire body shape leaned towards the most terrifying monster of the extinct dinosaur race, Tyrannosaurus rex. In the midst of the roar, the giant monster appeared. "Humph! Just watch. This is my little cutie. Humans have many different powers, but there is one power that has always been the same." After the monster tore Miss Q's mech apart, Miss Q took a few steps back and raised her hand to stroke the monster's huge legs that walked to her side from the wreckage of Miss Q's mech. Joy, sadness, anger, and fear. And fear is the strongest power. Because of fear, humans have developed newer and more terrifying weapons. Because of fear, humans will use all kinds of reasons to go to war against beings, organizations, and countries that they can't understand. Miss Q's eyes moved and looked at Lancelot, who had remained silent until now. Because of this ship that should have left here and returned to the universe was chosen by me. The passengers in this ship were all in fear and became the catalyst for the birth of my little cutie. Everything is so beautiful. Miss Q's mouth curved up slightly. Obviously, she was very proud of her plan. A monster born of fear. Skeleton. And White Cat State Zero, who was looking at the monster, slowly spat out a name. Skeleton? Is it the main force that destroyed our world? The appearance of the giant monster naturally caused Ray Minkai's memory to fluctuate. He remembered that this monster that was very similar to Tyrannosaurus rex was one of the main culprits that destroyed Soth's mech world. Yes, Kai. End this quickly. Understood. The next second, just as Miss Q was still talking to herself, Lancelot suddenly moved and dashed out a dozen seconds away. He waved his hand and looked at the monster named Skeleton. However, the moment Lancelot moved, the monster opened its mouth slightly and shot a beam at Lancelot, who rushed in front of it in the blink of an eye. One. Boom! The beam flashed and hit Lancelot. The huge explosion and strong wind made Miss Q raise her arms subconsciously and block in front of her eyes. What a reckless person! Why are all the men I meet such rude people? Miss Q showed a look of self-pity and kept lamenting that she met a bad person. The monster standing next to her did not pay attention to her master's complaints. Instead, it opened its mouth and shot out beams of light, hitting the core area of the explosion in a dense and continuous manner. Boom! Boom! Explosions sounded continuously, and the thick smoke in front of them didn't dissipate for a long time. Even if it was the monster, Skeleton's beam attack was able to scatter the thick smoke, but it couldn't completely disperse it. Looking at the frequency and power of the fierce attack, Lancelot was probably done for. Suddenly, Miss Q felt that something was wrong and raised her right hand. The monster named Skeleton suddenly stopped its attack and quietly waited for the moment when the thick smoke dissipated. 1. At this moment, within the billowing smoke, a buzzing sound of a pulley rapidly rotating could be heard. A strange shadow that was like a poisonous snake flashed and broke through the thick smoke, rushing to a position that was only 10 centimeters away from the Miss Q. Bang! With a flash of light, the snake-like shadow seemed to have collided with a wall and was sent flying backwards. But this wasn't the end. At the same time when the poisonous snake-like shadow flew backward, Lancelot, who should have been crushed by Skeleton's attack, opened the light wing system behind him and broke through the thick smoke from above. He swung his sword and slashed at Skeleton's head with sharp horns. Swoosh! The scarlet sword flashed and the horn on Skeleton's head was instantly cut off. Moreover, it wasn't only the horn that was cut off, but also the hideous and terrifying monster's head. 1. The light wing system roared and the monster's head fell to the ground, landing not far away from Miss Q. The moment the heavy head fell to the ground, it created a gust of wind. Miss Q's long dress was lifted up high. In this gust of wind, Miss Q's eyes suddenly became sharp and no longer had the laziness from before. Destroying other people's proud work without permission will lead to revenge. Chapter 323. Clang! The scarlet radiation vibration sword pierced through the huge head that fell to the ground. Mecha's voice also came from Lancelot's cockpit. Revenge? Don't you think that rather than taking revenge on me, you should be more worried about your own retribution? Retribution? Miss Q laughed in disdain and raised her eyes to look at Lancelot, who stabbed the radiation vibration sword into the head of the skeleton. You shouldn't be a native of this world. Since that's the case, do you still believe that there is retribution in this world, no, in this universe? As she said this, Miss Q chuckled. From the moment my hands were stained with the blood and lives of an entire colony satellite, I no longer believe that retribution exists. Miss Q's unrepentant expression made Mecha feel a trace of anger rise within him. Lancelot pulled out his radiation vibration sword and pointed it at Miss Q. Then, I will be your retribution. If you have the ability, then just come at me. In Miss Q's long life, she had already seen this kind of situation many times. Once again, the survivors who had their homes destroyed, the losers who had everything taken away from them, and all the lowly people who had suffered defeat in front of her had all let out similar howls. However, their results were the same. In the face of absolute power, the clamor of these lowly people, no matter how loud their roars were, would always be turned into nothingness by the light beam that could destroy everything. Just like now, Kai. Be careful. Suddenly, Lancelot, who was pointing his sword at Miss Q, accelerated and retreated. At the same time, he raised his left arm and pushed the radiation shield on his forearm to full power. Whang! In the next second, a light beam fiercely hit Lancelot's radiation shield. In an instant, the light beam with a diameter of almost 5 meters contained a powerful force that wrapped around Lancelot. What happened? The attack came suddenly. The sudden attack of the light beam did not even have any warning signs. Lancelot was still able to persevere under this huge beam of light because State Zero had activated the radiation shield at the first moment and taken the measure of retreating to avoid it. Otherwise, Miss Q would have succeeded. It's that monster. TSK. I was careless. I didn't expect this skeleton to have an ability that I didn't know about. The white cat State Zero's voice that was filled with anger continuously sounded. The skeleton that I know doesn't have high-speed regeneration ability. Just now when Lancelot chopped off Skeleton's head, it did not cause much fatal damage to the monster. Furthermore, when we were confronting Miss Q, this monster quietly recovered its head and launched a sneak attack. Boom! The huge light beam's powerful energies violently, the light beam, the lights, the light beam, the light beam, S. In front of Mecha's eyes, the indicator that represented Lancelot's current energy output load gradually soared towards the limit. If this continued, Lancelot's output would inevitably exceed the limit and enter a state of overload. At that time, the White Cat State Zero would probably have to deal with the problem of overload on Lancelot's energy output. The blazing light beam continued to shine on Lancelot's radiation shield. The light beam's aftermath that was blocked by the radiation shield and continued to spread along the radiation shield also continued to burn the floor under Lancelot's feet. Gradually, a magma tunnel formed by the blazing light beam was formed, and at the end of this magma tunnel was Lancelot, who was holding the radiation shield. TSK. What is this monster's structure? The light beam can actually last for so long? Kai. Prepare to overload. The White Cat State Zero was prepared for the worst. Fortunately, this worst-case scenario did not come in handy. After Lancelot was pushed back nearly 100 meters from his original position, the light beam's energy finally ran out. In the middle of the hot magma flowing, Lancelot, who was at the end of the magma tunnel, slowly stood up and put down his steaming left arm. It was obvious that in the process of blocking the light beam, the radiation shield on Lancelot's left arm was damaged to the point that it could not be used again. So tenacious. Such a small body can actually block Skeleton's sneak attack. What a surprise. But don't think that you can defeat my little cutie like this. Lancelot's defense shocked Miss Q. She did not expect that a small body less than 5 meters tall could be equipped with such a strong energy shield. With the small price of the energy shield's activation device, he was able to block Skeleton's full-force attack. However, this did not mean that Miss Q was afraid of Lancelot. From her point of view, since one Skeleton's attack could not defeat Lancelot, then two would come. Coincidentally, there was enough material for the second skeleton to enter the stage. Miss Q raised her finger and snapped. My little cutie. Stop sleeping. Get up and greet the guest. But, with a snap of his fingers, the head that Lancelot had chopped off suddenly opened its wheel-sized eyes and let out a terrifying roar. Roar. Not good. That head can regenerate quickly. Quickly get rid of that head. The White Cat State Zero's holographic projection shook and shouted anxiously. Ray Minkai decisively replaced the radiation vibrasword in Lancelot's left hand and took out the Vari's rifle from Lancelot's waist. He quickly aimed at the head of the skeleton that was growing countless tentacles and charging towards Kaluj's skeleton. He was ready to shoot. However, the moment Ray Minkai pulled the trigger, his heart was suddenly alarmed. Instinctively, Ray Minkai did not hesitate to continue shooting. He turned around and drove Lancelot to perform a few emergency maneuvers. Swish! 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 During the emergency maneuvers, Ray Minkai also saw the true face of the culprit that forced him and Lancelot to retreat. 3 crescent moon-like flashes. Without a doubt, this should be the attack that came from Skeleton's tail that had several crescent moon-like objects. Although Ray Minkai already knew the source of the attack, he could not escape from this attack for a while. The skeleton that had already recovered its head was constantly swinging its tail. The crescent moon-like weapons that were constantly thrown out and then regenerated at high speed attacked Lancelot. TSK. What the hell is this high-speed regeneration? Is this monster a biological weapon? In order to dodge faster and more effectively, Ray Minkai, who even tried to seize the opportunity in the process of dodging, once again activated Lancelot's light wing system and rushed to the top of Skeleton in one fell swoop. This strategy was effective. Compared to a planar ground battle, in the three-dimensional air, Lancelot, with the help of the light beam system, had more options for maneuvering. Therefore, the Vari's rifle in Lancelot's hand was once again aimed at the head that had already extended its tentacles into the wreckage of Kaluj. Bang! The trigger was pulled, and the Vari's rifle that had already been loaded instantly fired. It drew a faint flash in the air, and went straight to the head with countless wriggling tentacles. Boom! However, Lancelot's Vari's rifle did not hit the head. Instead, it once again encountered the invisible wall that the hook previously hit. Defensive force field. Once again encountering the invisible wall, Ray Minkai finally saw some clues. Kai. Move faster. If this drags on, we will have to face 2 skeletons. For the current Lancelot, 2 skeletons are too much for him. The White Cat State Zero's voice was very anxious. Based on the strength of the beam attack just now, if there was one more beam, even if all of Lancelot's radiation shields were activated, he would most likely be destroyed. I know. The situation was urgent. Looking at the wriggling tentacles that penetrated deep into the wreckage of Kaluj, as well as the skeleton that was gradually repairing below the head, Ray Minkai knew that he could not wait any longer. What should I do? If it was an 18-meter MS, maybe I would be a little afraid. But even if this small body of yours is equipped with a powerful light shield, you can't rely on your poor equipment to penetrate my little cutie's defensive force field. Standing next to the rapidly repairing skeleton's head, Miss Q raised her head slightly and looked at Lancelot in midair. Miss Q, don't be too proud. Just you wait. The White Cat State Zero's roar echoed in the vast space of the underground hangar through Lancelot's sound amplifier. Hee hee. No matter how many times I hear it, these sounds always make me happy. Miss Q did not take the White Cat State Zero's roar to heart. As mentioned before, Miss Q was already used to facing similar situations. Calm down. State Zero. When attacking for a long time without success, the biggest taboo was to be impatient and lose one's footing. After Ray Minkai comforted the White Cat State Zero, he set his gaze on the wreckage of Kailuj. In Ray Minkai's plan, there were two options. The first was to directly use the Long Fong Lion State Zero and use Zunaida's powerful destructive power to destroy Skeleton and the head in one fell swoop. The second was to bypass Skeleton and directly attack the wreckage of Kailuj. According to Ray Minkai's observation, there were a few trucks parked 100 meters away from Kailuj. From the appearance of the cargo containers, it seemed to be some ammunition. Perhaps he could also try to trigger a violent explosion and engulf Skeleton and Miss Q together. However, these two options had the same concern. That was, there was no 100% chance of killing Miss Q in the attack. Ray Minkai did not simply think that the enemy did not have a way to smoothly escape in a dangerous situation. Kai, don't think so much. Let's get rid of Skeleton first. Compared to Ray Minkai's concern, the White Cat State Zero's goal was much simpler. For it, nothing was more important than destroying Skeleton and the two monsters. Okay. Since he could not guarantee that he could kill Miss Q in one fell swoop, then he would focus on solving the problem in front of him. Spreading out his light wings, Lancelot quickly circled half a circle along the ceiling of the underground hangar. After dodging the continuous crescent moon attacks, he suddenly stopped at the top right of Kailuj. He raised the Vari's rifle in his hand and continuously fired at the trucks parked 100 meters away from Kailuj. Not good. In the beginning, Miss Q, who thought that victory was in her hands, did not pay attention to Lancelot's movements. However, after Lancelot fired a few shots at the trucks loaded with ammunition, she suddenly exclaimed, "Skeleton! Fully activate the force field!" Boom! With a flash of light, the moment Skeleton fully activated the force field, the trucks loaded with ammunition suddenly exploded and set off a violent firestorm. Without any suspense, Kailuj's thick outer shell, which was originally used to isolate the outside world, was torn apart when Skeleton appeared. There was no possibility that it would not be affected by the firestorm set off by the huge explosion of ammunition. Therefore, the entire underground hangar was submerged in it. In the next moment, the several ammunition depots next to the underground hangar were set off with an even bigger and more violent explosion. It was enough to submerge the entire underground hangar, no, the entire underground base. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In just a short moment, Lancelot's shots caused an explosion in the underground hangar that engulfed the entire underground base. Quickly leave this place. The White Cat State Zero displayed the safe route it sensed on the screen in front of Ray Minkai. It constantly guided Ray Minkai to drive Lancelot away from the underground base that had already collapsed. During the entire process, Ray Minkai was silent. However, just now, Ray Minkai was surprised that Lancelot's shots could cause such a huge explosion. Being surprised was one thing. Right now, the most important thing was to immediately escape from this underground base that was about to collapse. This action was far more important than confirming whether Miss Q had died in the explosion. Rumble, rumble. The tunnel was shaking. No, it should be said that the entire mountain was shaking from the explosion. No matter how well it was, Ray Minkai could clearly see that the rock wall above was being torn apart by cracks. Countless gravel was pouring down from above. In just a few more minutes, the tunnel would probably collapse. Quick, quick, Kai. Turn right. The White Cat State Zero's reminder kept ringing. Under Ray Minkai's control, Lancelot also dodged left and right to avoid the huge rocks that were collapsing from above. At this critical moment, Ray Minkai even gave up on the idea of dodging. He directly let Lancelot raise the Vari's rifle in his hand and shoot all the tigers that were blocking the way. Turn left. Go straight. You are still 1,000 meters away from leaving the underground base. Quick, quick. The white cat state 0 reminded him again. The light wings behind Lancelot's back were retracted. Immediately, the inertia brought about by the high-speed flight caused it to slide on the ground. Moreover, Ray Minkai increased the rotation of the guide wheel to the highest level. The closer they were to the exit, the smaller the surrounding space, and the more gravel that fell from above. Under such circumstances, if they continued to maintain Lancelot's flying mode, some unnecessary accidents might occur. 500 meters. Ray Minkai held the joystick tightly with both hands. His thumb could not move away from the trigger. The Vari's rifle in Lancelot's hand would fire a bullet every 10 meters, less than 20 meters, to shatter the huge rocks that were falling from above. 300 meters. There were more and more tigers blocking the way. Relying solely on the Vari's rifle in his hand, he could no longer keep up with the speed of the falling gravel. To this end, Lancelot waved the radiation vibroblade in his right hand and chopped the small rocks that were not big enough for the Vari's rifle to fire. 100 meters. Quick! The exit is right in front of you. The white cat state 0 shouted. Rumble! At the same time, the tunnel behind Lancelot flashed. The surging energy released by the explosion was actually chasing after the tunnel that Lancelot had walked through. If Lancelot's footsteps were slightly slower, he would have been swallowed by the energy of the explosion. Kai! Quick! In this crisis, Ray Minkai made up his mind and moved his hands and feet continuously. Lancelot put his left hand behind his back, and the Vari's rifle was once again hung behind his waist. Immediately after, Lancelot raised his left hand and the hook shot out. In the next second, Lancelot bent his legs, and the light wings on his back spread out. The moment the hook deeply pierced into the rock wall beside the exit, he soared into the air and flew towards the exit. 50 meters, 30 meters, 10 meters. The moment the terrifying energy swept over from behind, Lancelot rushed out of the exit. Then, with a flap of the light wings, Lancelot immediately soared into the sky at a 90-degree angle, avoiding the terrifying energy that followed closely behind. Chapter 324. Rumble! The earth was roaring. The turbulent energy hidden deep underground was tumbling madly, subverting everything it could. Mountain, cliff, forest, as long as it was above the energy, everything would struggle bitterly under the violent tremors. What's going on? Neguri, who was holding the steering wheel, did not have time to wait for Shiro Amada's order. He subconsciously drove the Type 74 hovercraft truck in a certain direction. Elidoya, who was sitting next to him, could no longer reprimand Neguri for his rash action. Because at the moment when the turbulent energy erupted, Elidoya, who was wearing headphones to listen to the surrounding situation, was instantly immersed in the loud sound of the underground explosion. It took him a long time to recover his damaged hearing. Now, the only thing he could do was to try to open the communication channel and shout with all his might to remind Shiro Amada and the others to pay attention to the surrounding situation. However, he could not hear his teammates' reply. Rumble! The earth was roaring. The path of the Type 74 hovercraft truck was full of cracks. The cracks were tearing the earth apart and rapidly expanding into an abyss large enough to swallow the Type 74 hovercraft truck. Neguri clenched his teeth and held the steering wheel tightly. His eyes were red as he looked at the unpredictable terrain in front of him. As long as he wasn't careful, this pitiful Type 74 air cushion truck would most likely lose its life in this rapidly changing land. How can it be finished like this? I still haven't gone back to see my beloved BB? Negri shouted out his unfinished wish, tightly gripping the steering wheel, firmly controlling the direction of the Type 74 air cushion truck. He didn't want it to be swallowed by a sudden crack, or hit a boulder that suddenly protruded from the ground. Rumble! The earth was still roaring. Eladoya was still shouting everyone's names loudly, even if he had temporarily lost his hearing. Ah ah ah! All Negri could see in front of him were cracks and protruding boulders. He tried his best to protect himself, Eladoya, and the Type 74 air cushion truck in the midst of this great change. This was perhaps the only thing he could do now. Gotcha! Suddenly, the ground beneath the speeding Type 74 air cushion truck was suddenly torn apart. A surge of blazing flame gushed out from the crack, hitting the undercarriage of the Type 74 air cushion truck without missing a beat. Boom! Ah! In an instant, Negri, who was desperately trying to escape, suddenly felt the world spin. Then, the entire world fell silent. All that was left was the image in front of his eyes, the flying papers, and Eladoya, who was holding on tightly to the handle beside him. At this moment, Negri felt what Eladoya had felt before. At this moment, all the noise in this world had faded away, leaving behind only that feeling of unwillingness. How could this be? I haven't gone back to see Bibi yet? Negri tried his best to open his mouth wide, but he didn't shout. Perhaps the current Michael had already been taken away. Boom! At the next moment, an ear-piercing sound of metal being torn apart rang out, bringing Negri back to this world that was still filled with the furious roars of the earth. Squeak! Following the sound of metal being torn apart, a sharp metal bar broke through the exterior of the Type 74 air cushion truck and appeared in front of Negri's eyes. This is... Before Negri could clearly see the metal barb's true identity, the Type 74 air cushion truck began to roll again. However, this time, the rolling wasn't as intense as before. Negri could even feel that this rolling seemed to be adjusting the Type 74 air cushion truck's posture. Am I saved? This thought uncontrollably appeared in Negri's mind, but he quickly chased it out of his mind and turned to look at Eladoya's position. Fortunately, Eladoya, who was temporarily deaf, seemed to have fainted during the tumbling crisis just now. What a lucky guy! Negri glanced at Eladoya's condition and slowly let out a sigh of relief. It's fine. This Type 74 air cushion truck seems to have survived the disaster. This is all thanks to suddenly, Negri stood up abruptly and used all his strength to open a path in the messy cabin. He then used all his strength to kick open the somewhat distorted cabin door. When Negri poked his head out of the cabin door of the Type 74 air cushion truck, he was shocked by the scene in front of him. Negri, who was focused on escaping just now, knew that the surrounding terrain had changed a little, but he didn't know that these changes would be so shocking. Earth Dragon Flip. Perhaps this phrase could be used to describe the earth-shattering scene that had just occurred in that ancient eastern country. In this huge change, the city at the foot of the mountain had been destroyed. All the buildings seemed to have been flipped upside down, falling into the cracks that tore the earth apart in a mess. The lush green forest from before had already disappeared, leaving behind only a tragic scene that was mixed with countless amounts of dirt and mud. The beautiful tropical rainforest of the past had now become a deathly silent hell. How did it become like this? It's just an earthquake. Although Negri, who grew up on a colonial satellite, had read about earthquakes in books, but it was the first time that he personally experienced the horror of an earthquake. Negri, who was shocked by the horrifying scene in front of him, scrambled out of the Type 74 air cushion truck. He stared blankly at the distance, at the mountain with many landslides. He knew that this mountain was the target of the 8th team's attack. Negri, are you okay? At this moment, a familiar voice made Negri shocked. He quickly turned around and looked behind him. Ah! Before he calmed down, Negri was shocked by the steel humanoid mech that suddenly appeared behind him. It was about 5 meters tall and was painted in platinum. He had never seen such a mech before. MS? Are you okay? Negri. It's me. The steel humanoid mech painted in platinum raised its hand. The golden barb that saved the Type 74 air cushion truck from the fate of destruction immediately flew back to the mech's right arm. At the same time, Negri gradually came back to his senses. He finally recognized the owner of the voice coming from the mech. Ray Minkai? Second Lieutenant? It's me. Negri. Are you okay? In order to appease Negri, Ray Minkai opened Lancelot's cockpit and walked out. He stood on Lancelot's shoulder and looked at Negri, who was powerlessly paralyzed on the ground. It's really Second Lieutenant. But where did you get this mech from? I have never seen such an MS? After the shock, Negri's attention gradually returned to Lancelot. We'll talk about this later. Can you still move now? Hurry up and fix this Type 74 air cushion truck, then evacuate from here. Ray Minkai looked up at the mountain in the distance. Intuition told him that the battle was far from over. Yes. But Eladoya doesn't seem to be able to hear anything. Negri responded, then said something that made Ray Minkai frown. Let's evacuate from here first. At the moment, Ray Minkai did not have much energy to deal with Eladoya's loss of hearing. After all, compared to this, Ray Minkai was more concerned about the life and death of Miss Q. However, even though he said that, Ray Minkai still took out a bottle of recovery fluid and gave it to Negri to try injecting it into Eladoya. He wanted to see if Eladoya's condition could be alleviated. TSK. What a good guy. Kai, is this your night spirit? Looking at the Type 74 air cushion truck that was quickly disappearing in the distance, the white cat, Type 0, jumped out of Lancelot's cockpit and landed beside Ray Minkai's feet. When a teammate is in trouble, I have to help. This is not a good guy. Type 0. Ray Minkai retracted his gaze and looked at the mountain in the distance. Yes. When a teammate is in trouble, you have to help. However, the teammate who needs your help is over there. The white cat, Type 0, raised its paw and pointed at the mountain in the distance. Just now, I felt that woman's aura. She did not die in the explosion. The white cat, Type 0, revealed the truth that Miss Q was not killed by the explosion caused by the ammunition explosion. However, this did not surprise Ray Minkai. This was because from the beginning, Ray Minkai did not think that this matter would be settled once and for all. If this woman named Miss Q was so easy to deal with, the world that Type 0 came from would probably be destroyed. Let's go. In the next moment, Ray Minkai controlled Lancelot, which was once again controlled by Ray Minkai, spread its wings and rushed into the sky, flying straight towards the mountain. Woo! In the darkness, Amada Shiro, who was awakened by a severe pain, opened his eyes with difficulty and tried to see the situation around him. The smell of something burning came from the side of his nose. The chair beneath him began to tremble slightly. Wave after wave of tremors continuously assaulted him. What's going on? As soon as this thought came to mind, a memory immediately appeared in Amada Shiro's mind. It was a memory of the past. Amada Shiro remembered that after Ray Minkai and the Blue Tiger were both injured, the 8th Squad led by him assisted the steel tank to bombard the huge Apsaras III, which appeared on the mountain top. In the end, the bombardment failed. Instead, all the steel tanks were lost in the enraged Apsaras III. Moreover, the 8th Squad was the first to have to leave the battlefield since the beginning of this battle. Karen and Sandus, the Gauda driven by the two of them, were affected by the beam of light that fell from the sky when the steel tank was blown up by the Apsaras III that suddenly went berserk, and they almost stepped into the end of the steel tank. However, the two who were lucky enough to escape death had to face the predicament that their mecha could no longer continue to fight. Damn it! This accident happened at this critical moment. Karen was unwilling to give up and repeatedly pounded the console that had been turned off. Karen, Sandus, leave the rest to me. Looking at the team members who were lucky enough to escape death, Amada Shiro couldn't help but secretly rejoice. Now, it's time for him to solve his own problems. So, Amada Shiro drove his Easy 8 up the mountain. What Amada Shiro didn't expect was that before he could drive the Easy 8 to fight the Apsaras 3 and rescue Aina, the cockpit of the Apsaras 3 suddenly opened by itself. At the same time, a figure flew out of the cockpit amidst the strong wind. Shiro Amada didn't have time to figure out what was going on. He quickly drove the Easy 8 to Ayane's body and caught her. Then, there was the earth-shaking change. Aina? When he thought of Aina, Amada Shiro immediately woke up, and even the pain in his body disappeared at this moment. Fortunately, Aina, who he was thinking about, was lying in his arms. She seemed to have fainted. Feeling Ayane's breathing, Amada Shiro slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Aina is still alive. How ugly. I didn't expect my sister, Aina Sakhaline, to fall in love with such an unbearable man. At this moment, a proud and cruel voice suddenly sounded. Then, the earthquake appeared again. Rumble! The violent tremors caused Shiro Amada to be unable to react immediately. He could only instinctively protect the unconscious Aina in his arms. Boom! With a loud noise, dust rose into the air, and a behemoth also saw the light of day in the dust. Aina, all this time, it's been hard on you. So, as your brother, now I will give you the last and best gift. Buzz! In the midst of the dust, a ray of light rose. It was the large-caliber Mega particle cannon of the Apsaras 3 that was accumulating energy. Just as the voice had said, now was the time for him to give his sister, Aina Sakhaline, the best gift he could give her. Die. Aina! This is my last gift as an older brother to Kinia Sakhaline. Click! The trigger was pulled. Boom! At this moment, Amada Shiro hugged Aina tightly with both hands. In front of him, there was a bright light. However, this light was not the light that represented a beautiful tomorrow, but the light that represented the end of life. Rumble! A loud roar was set off by the rushing of particles. The blazing temperature was able to envelop Amada Shiro and Aina without any obstruction. However, Amada Shiro was surprised to see that the terrifying light beam that was supposed to erase him and Aina from this world had deviated to the other side. It went from 30 meters to the right of Gouda and went straight to the low hill in the distance. Boom! In the midst of an earth-shattering explosion, Amada Shiro saw a metal body that was much smaller than the size of Apsaras 3, but was able to push Apsaras 3 away. It raised the sharp sword in its hand and stabbed towards Apsaras 3's head. Chapter 325. Where did this little bastard come from? Get out of my way! Seeing the sudden appearance of this small, inconspicuous mech that appeared out of nowhere and interrupted Kinias's plans, Kinias's heart was instantly filled with an uncontrollable rage. Hum! A slight buzzing sound was heard along with Kinnis' angry roar. Although this buzzing sound was very faint, Rei Minkai still keenly captured it. Therefore, Rei Minkai did not hesitate to retract Lancelot's radiation vibroblade that was aimed at Zaga's head, and controlled Lancelot to lift his leg and forcefully kick Apsaras 3's armor to soar into the sky again. Boom! Following Lancelot's departure, the sound of something breaking could be heard, but it did not cause any abnormalities. Force field. In Rei Minkai's senses, he did feel that something had unfolded at that moment. And the next scene also gave Rei Minkai a chance to verify his speculation. Under the hillside that underwent a huge change due to the earthquake just now, a small but unusually clear beam of light broke through the air and headed straight for Apsaras 3's head the moment Lancelot jumped from Apsaras 3 into the air. It seemed to want to continue Lancelot's unfinished attack. However, just as Rei Minkai had sensed, The buzzing sound of the force field being activated was instantly blocked when the beam of light was about to hit Zagu's head of Apsara's 3. The force field that Rei Minkai perceived did exist, but it could not be seen with the naked eye. Effortlessly distorted the beam of light and refracted it in another direction. I force field. Apsara's 3 is actually equipped with I force field? Is it the influence of Miss Q? Lancelot, who was hovering in the air, took this opportunity to observe the battle below as much as possible. Rei Minkai was also constantly estimating the changes between Apsara's 3 and the one in his memory. "You're in the way," Kenya's roared angrily, and the Apsara's 3's large-caliber Mega particle cannon lit up again. In the blink of an eye, a beam of light the same size as the one that attacked Apsara's 3, but the color was deathly gray, exploded from the front of the Mega particle cannon. The moment the flash swept through the rugged area where the ambusher was hiding, a terrifying explosion suddenly broke out. Rumble! Wherever the flash passed, everything turned into ashes. Even the thick ground was still lifted by the flash, revealing the scorching traces after the terrifying energy melted it. Not to mention the ambusher hidden among them. In the explosion just now, Lancelot's electronic eyes keenly captured the steel head that was blown away. Rei Minkai recognized it at a glance. It was the head monitor of Sniper Jim. He did not expect that Sniper Jim, who affected the final outcome of the battle, would end up like this. And Apsara's 3, who should have had its support broken by Sniper Jim and fell into a long period of paralysis, was still alive and kicking. Rei Minkai's heart tightened and Lancelot immediately moved to the right, avoiding a beam that came from below. It was a beam attack from Apsara's 3. After taking care of Sniper Jim, who had ambushed him in the dark, Kineas immediately targeted Lancelot, who had interrupted his farewell gift to his sister Aina. "Kai, we are being watched," White Cat Zero reminded. "I know," Rei Minkai responded casually. Now, although Rei Minkai relied on his small size and flexibility to make Apsara's 3's attacks miss, Rei Minkai faintly felt that Apsara's 3's performance should not be so simple. After all, in the original setting, the I force field that did not appear at all appeared at this moment. In the next second, Rei Minkai would not find anything wrong with Apsara's 3's strange performance. Da-da-da-da-da! Kai. Below. When the unique roar of the Gatling gun tore through the sky, the White Cat Zero's reminder rang in Rei Minkai's ears. The next moment, Lancelot suddenly sank, dropping from the original height by tens of meters, and then rose again, avoiding the attack that followed closely. "It's a flying tiger!" When the light wing system successfully brought Lancelot to a higher altitude, Rei Minkai also saw the true face of the murderer who attacked Lancelot. "It's a flying tiger!" Da-da-da! Lancelot's increase in altitude did not make the two flying tigers that suddenly appeared around Apsara's 3 give up their attack. Instead, they kept increasing the power of the flying system, trying to close the distance between them and Lancelot. However, even so, the huge gap between the two flying systems was not something that the pilot's willpower could bridge. Although Lancelot's body was relatively small, the light wing system that it was equipped with was a new generation of flying systems designed from the beginning for aerial combat. Therefore, the flying tigers that were still in the experimental stage were particularly powerless. The flying tiger's flying systems were powerless just by the height that the light wing system could reach. TSK. What kind of monster is this? Although it's small, why is it flying at such a high altitude? The pilots of the flying tigers who kept increasing their flying altitude to the limit finally gave up the idea of chasing Lancelot and chose to return to Apsara's 3's surroundings to continue escorting it. Lancelot's figure shuttled back and forth in the clouds, constantly hovering above Apsara's 3. Perhaps after discovering Lancelot's ability to fly at high altitudes, the flying tiger stopped its pursuit. Even Apsara's 3, who had been continuously attacking Lancelot with its diffuse beam cannon, stopped its actions and remained motionless. The enemy's movement has stopped. In confusion, White Cat State Zero activated Lancelot's electronic eyes and quickly adjusted the multiplier to the maximum. In the next second, White Cat State Zero's eyes suddenly became vertical lines. Miss Q! A fiery red figure appeared on the screen. Under the escort of the monster named Skeleton, it slowly walked towards Apsara's 3 that landed on the ground. Not dead. Yes, Miss Q is really not dead. Ray Minkai's hunch was not wrong. The woman who had destroyed State Zero and his home world would not die so easily. Perhaps in the explosion just now, the monster's head that was regenerating at a high speed became Miss Q's scapegoat. Otherwise, the monster that should have appeared on the ground below would not be as simple as a skeleton. Kai. White Cat State Zero's voice was very anxious. Ray Minkai understood the feeling of seeing the enemy appear. But under the escort of Skeleton, Miss Q walked out of the collapsed underground base despite being in a sorry state. She raised her head and looked at the sky, looking at Lancelot who was hovering high in the sky. What a naughty little guy. But now is not the time to settle the score with you. Skeleton, go and say hello to our little friend, so that you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Miss Q's voice was particularly lazy, as if she did not care that Lancelot was hovering back and forth above her head. Roar. Skeleton, who was following beside Miss Q, let out a roar and raised his head. The pair of thick legs under his body suddenly folded inwards. Then 2 rays of green light slowly appeared on both sides of his tail. He immediately soared into the sky and rushed towards Lancelot like lightning. His speed was so fast that Ray Minkai almost could not react in time. Making a prompt decision, Ray Minkai did not care about why Skeleton suddenly had the ability to fly. He immediately rolled Lancelot 720 degrees to the left and immediately took out the Vari's rifle. He aimed at Skeleton and fired 3 consecutive shots. However, the monster dodged all of them. It's actually so agile. Lancelot spread its light wings and increased its speed again. Ray Minkai's eyebrows gradually frowned. He did not expect this monster to have such outstanding aerial performance. He was afraid that it would take some effort to get rid of it. Kai, I have an idea. At this moment, the White Cat State Zero suddenly made a suggestion. Mississippi Q, I'm afraid I have to disappoint you. Walking out of the cockpit of the Apsalis 3, Kenya's slightly apologized to Miss Q, who was standing in front of him. However, Miss Q did not care about Kenya's apology. Instead, she raised her gaze and glanced at the cockpit and slightly shook her head. As expected, a woman in love will always choose the one who will make her happy. Kenya's, your brother doesn't seem to be much. Mississippi, Kenya's slightly frowned. It was obvious that Miss Q was tearing open his scars. Even though Kenya's was faintly expressing his dissatisfaction, Miss Q did not care. What she said just now was just a casual remark. If this caused Kenya's to hate her, Miss Q would not care. Could it be that Kenya's could still turn the sky upside down? Let's go. Kenya's, go and fulfill your dream. Since your sister is no longer here, then let me play with the main pilot's seat. It's been a long time since I personally drove John's body. Miss Q looked past Kenya's with a trace of nostalgia in her eyes. However, Kenya's, who had his back facing Miss, did not notice this moment. Roar! Before the Apsalis 3, which had a new main pilot, could take off again, the thunderous roar of a beast sounded in the sky. In the next moment 2 black shadows, in the midst of the tearing sound of the wind, fell from the sky like meteors falling to earth. They fiercely smashed into the ground a few hundred meters in front of the Apsalis 3. Boom! The violent impact instantly set off a powerful shockwave that suppressed the flying tigers floating on the left and right sides of the Apsalas 3 to the ground. Under this shockwave, the flying tigers could only quickly crouch down to reduce the contact area between the shockwave and the body to avoid being blown away. The Apsalas 3, which was already large enough, was as stable as Mount Tai. It only closed the cockpit in time and was already prepared to withstand the shockwave. That is Skeleton, Miss. Q, who was sitting in the main pilot's seat, had very sharp eyes. She immediately recognized that the figure struggling in the dust was the little cutie she was talking about, Skeleton. Roar! After the shockwave gradually subsided, the monster's roar did not stop. Instead, it became more and more intense. No matter who it was, after hearing this increasingly shrill roar, they subconsciously thought that this monster might be finished. Yes, under the scattered dust, the long neck of the skeleton was bitten by a behemoth that was 30 meters long and 10 meters tall. As soon as the true face of this behemoth appeared, everyone cried out in surprise. Lion? A huge lion? The pure white body, the sacred and mighty lion's head, the sharp teeth that pierced deeply into the neck of the skeleton, and the sharp claws that prevented the skeleton from breaking free. This was the scene of a living beast king hunting for food. However, this scene was played out by two steel beasts and a biochemical monster. Lion? A long-toothed lion. At this moment Miss Q recognized the pure white steel lion at a glance. So that's how it is. My Avenger and my engine are your doing. Skeleton! Kill it! Now that everything was clear, Miss Q, who had always kept her losses in her heart, instantly understood who the culprit behind her losses all this time was. Roar! The monster let out an even more shrill roar and suddenly raised its strength to the peak. The moment a strange light appeared all over its body, Skeleton's pair of powerful legs suddenly kicked the pure white lion's abdomen. Boom! In the roar of the metal collision, the pure white lion flew upside down. After rolling half a circle in the air, it landed heavily on the ground. Quick! Chance! Seeing the pure white lion being kicked away by Skeleton, the flying tiger that had just recovered from the shockwave immediately tried to chase after it. However, in the dark, two scarlet flashes of light swept out from the shadows without warning. With a speed that was almost impossible to catch with the naked eye, they went straight for the flying tiger on the left side of Apsalas 3. It was also the first flying tiger that raised the grim shield in its hand and tried to shoot at the pure white lion. Swish! 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 3 consecutive slashes. Before the scarlet flashes of light completely disappeared, the flying tiger that attacked first had both its hands and one of its legs chopped off. What happened? Immediately after, while the flying tiger was still puzzled as to why its own plane issued an ear-piercing alarm, the same scarlet flashes of light appeared on the right side of Apsalas 3 and went straight for the flying tiger that was slightly slower by half a beat. Swish! 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 The same 3 consecutive slashes, the same broken hands and legs. The only difference was that the moment the grim shield fell to the ground, the 4th scarlet flashes of light pierced straight into the flying tiger's cockpit. At this moment, there were only 2 behemoths left on the battlefield. Apsalas 3 and Lancelot, who had put away the radiation vibration sword and once again stood in front of Apsalas 3. Chapter 326. Steel Lion? Seeing that her little cutie was bitten so deep that the bones could be seen, Miss Q's voice became extremely cold. The coldness in her voice even dispelled Kenya's thoughts of asking about the situation. I didn't expect that there would still be survivors in that pitiful world. And to appear in front of me, it's really... Miss Q's voice paused, and spat out a sentence with some hatred. It's really the arrangement of fate. Miss Q seemed to have used up all her strength to say the word fate. However, in the end, it was still the main culprit that caused the destruction of the entire world. Miss Q returned to normal in the next moment and shouted coldly, "Skeleton! Kill this lion!" Roar! With an order, the monster whose neck was almost bitten off by the pure white giant lion shook its head and quickly repaired the bite mark left on its neck by the pure white giant lion. Such an amazing regenerative ability made Ray Minkai amazed. State 0. Is there really no problem on your side? Facing an enemy with such amazing regenerative ability, Ray Minkai couldn't help but worry. No problem. It's just a defeated opponent. Ray Minkai's question didn't attract the attention of the White Cat State 0 at all. For it, since it had already recognized the true form of skeleton, it meant that the White Cat State 0 must know its weakness. And it could be seen from the previous exchange that the pure white giant lion State 0 caught the opportunity when it appeared in the sky and shot down the biochemical monster with the ability to fly. Roar. The two behemoths kept roaring like two ferocious beasts facing each other on a narrow path. They put on their most terrifying posture. However, this posture was the one that State 0 disdained the most. Hence, State 0, who had already recovered its true form of the long-fanged lion, took the lead and pounced towards Skeleton. No matter how many times you appear, you'll always be a defeated opponent. Skeleton! Roar! The plasma thrusters on the back of the pure white long-fanged lion suddenly burst out with two dazzling lights, constantly providing the long-fanged lion with a surge of power. In the blink of an eye, a short distance of 100 meters had been crossed by the long-toothed lion at full speed. It jumped up and waved its laser claws that were already shining with golden light towards the skeleton. Bang! A loud, ear-piercing sound of metal colliding rang out. Long Fong Lion's laser claw was actually blocked. It was blocked by Skeleton's three crescent-shaped weapons. His laser claws, which had been invincible in the past, had only managed to scratch a few holes in it. TSK. Hardened. Due to the high-speed regeneration ability that Skeleton had not shown in his memory, State 0 had secretly reserved some power just in case. In the end, he really did use it. After Skeleton's tail blocked the laser claw of the Long Fong Lion Style 0, it suddenly bounced and the three crescent-shaped weapons shot straight towards the Long Fong Lion Style 0's head. However, as mentioned before, Long Fong Lion had reserved some power from the beginning just in case. Hence, at the moment when the three crescent-shaped weapons shot out, Long Fong Lion suddenly lowered its head and bent down, easily dodging this wave of attack. Then, Long Fong Lion, who was lying on the ground, exerted force again. The moment its hind legs kicked up, a pair of front claws once again lit up with the unique golden light of the laser claws. "Lie down for me!" In the midst of Long Fong Lion's roar, Skeleton, who had no time to dodge, took a solid hit from the laser claws in the blink of an eye and fell to the ground. Roar! Long Fong Lion's laser claws were not something to be trifled with. Any enemy who took a solid hit from Long Fong Lion's laser claws would end up either dead or crippled. The right claw of the Long Fong Lion Style firmly pressed down on the part of the skeleton's neck that was connected to the body. Even if the biochemical monster was slapped to the ground by the laser claw, it was still firmly pressed to the ground. No matter how it moved, it could not get up again. Just that, State 0's gaze fell on Skeleton's chest area. There, it was faintly emitting an ominous aura. That woman. This ominous aura reminded State 0 of the battleship parked behind Miss Q when he saw her in the underground hangar. Most likely, the humans in the battleship had already become food for this monster. Humph. Ominous things will eventually fall into hell. Die. In the midst of State 0's cold snort, the two cannons under Long Fong Lion's chest immediately locked onto the location of the ominous aura and fiercely shot out a burst of fierce artillery fire. Boom! 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 Long Fong Lion was merciless and crazily poured all the ammunition equipped by the cannons on Skeleton's body. It knew that it absolutely could not give this biochemical monster that possessed high-speed regenerative abilities the slightest chance to recover. Otherwise, this biochemical monster would definitely take the opportunity to recover and wantonly destroy everything in its sight. Thunderous explosions continued to sound and spread in all directions, attracting the attention of someone who had escaped from the city that had been turned into ruins in the distance. Is this still a battle between humans? The man whose head, left arm, and left leg were tied with bandages that were slightly oozing blood. He was stunned as he put down the binoculars in his hand. Now, the man was standing on the edge of the city on the roof of a few buildings that were lucky enough to survive the earthquake. Therefore, the man who was observing the surroundings with his binoculars witnessed Long Fong Lion and Skeleton falling from a high altitude, and now Long Fong Lion pressed the biochemical monster to the ground in one fell swoop. As one of the most elite members of the Gion army, the man had never heard of the existence of a project to create monsters within the Gion army. Moreover, according to his battlefield experience and vision, the beast monster that was fighting should not be a product of Earth. Whether it was the Federation or Gion, could it be related to that small body? In an instant, the man thought of the encounter in the rainforest and the enigmatic small body with extremely high maneuverability that he encountered. If he were to put that strange little mech together with this pair of fierce beasts, the man actually felt that it was a matter of course. Is this world undergoing changes that are beyond our control? After thinking for a while, the man shook his head and threw these unrealistic thoughts together. Right now, he had more important things waiting for him to do. Miss Ina. Nothing must happen to you. Ina Sakhaline. In the battle just now, if it wasn't for Lancelot's timely appearance and forcefully pushing the Apsara's 3's beam attack path away from the original axis by a few degrees, Ina Sakhaline would probably be on the road to hell with Shiro Amada, just like what Kineas thought. Mississippi Ms. Q. After Kineas finished adjusting the parameters of the Apsara's 3's error, he raised his gaze and looked at the fiery red woman sitting in the driver's seat. Sir Kineas, I've let you see a joke. Now it's time to get down to business. Miss Q seemed to have regained her calmness, and her voice also returned to its usual lazy state. Kineas glanced at the skeleton that was being rubbed back and forth on the ground by the tusked lion type 0. Mississippi. Your soldier. Miss Q was slightly stunned, then smiled. Don't mind it. The skeleton is not my soldier, it's just a cute pet. Kineas, do you know? For me, a pet is just an item that can be replaced at any time. Kineas' eyebrows suddenly jumped a few times, but he couldn't say anything, because, at that moment, Kineas suddenly felt that the Miss Q in front of him was much more unfathomable than he expected. Just that, now, Kineas had no possibility of turning back. It's coming. At this moment, Miss Q's voice suddenly became cold. The screen in front of Kineas' eyes suddenly blurred. It was the enemy's attack. It turned out that, during the conversation between Miss Q and Kineas, Ray Minkai saw that the tusked lion type 0 was already making progress, so he decisively took the initiative to attack. Lancelot's legs exerted force, and while jumping into the air, he once again changed to the Vari's rifle and fired 3 consecutive shots at the Apsara's 3. Bang! 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 Due to his scruples about the I-force field displayed by the Apsara's 3 before, Ray Minkai did not activate the Vari's rifle's illumination mode, and only used the normal shooting mode. However, under the thick armor of the Apsara's 3, it had no effect. The armor is actually so thick? Looking at the result of only leaving a few bullet marks on the Apsara's 3, Ray Minkai frowned slightly. This, perhaps, was expected. Facing the armor that was far harder than the armor equipped by the KMF body, Ray Minkai did not put all his hopes on the Vari's rifle's normal shooting mode from the beginning. In the end, I still have to rely on the radiation vibrating sword? The illumination mode could not break through the protection of the I-force field, and the normal shooting mode could not penetrate the armor of the Apsaras 3. If he wanted to cause damage to the Apsaras 3, he would have to aim at its weak point. However, would the opponent let Lancelot succeed? The answer was no. Before Lancelot could get close, the Apsaras 3's diffusion mirror around the Mega Particle Cannon had already been activated. When Lancelot was halfway through the distance, the Apsaras 3 fired. TSK. Sure enough. Seeing this, Ray Minkai decisively gave up the idea of continuing to approach the Apsaras 3. Once again, he increased the altitude of Lancelot and quickly got out of the attack range of the Apsaras 3. However, Miss Q would not let Lancelot get out of the attack range of the Apsaras 3 so easily. Stay! As the three supports supporting the huge body of the Apsaras 3 slowly rose, it also raised the firing angle of the Apsaras 3, and it tightly followed Lancelot's movement path. TSK. You're not letting me go? Ray Minkai turned his thumb and pressed it. The radiation shield in front of Lancelot's chest suddenly opened at full strength. If it were not for the previous battle in the underground hangar where the radiation shield in his left hand was damaged, the radiation shield now would be the strongest defense Lancelot could have. He couldn't see it. Ray Minkai couldn't see the direction of the particle beam at all. The only thing he could see was the continuous light spots at the front of the large-caliber Mega Particle Cannon of the Apsaras 3, as well as the bombardment light balls that constantly hit the radiation shield. Beep 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 beep. Amidst the urgent sirens, Lancelot's radiation shield did indeed block the Apsaras 3's particle cannon, but Lancelot's situation was not optimistic. Is it about to overload? Although in the previous battle, Lancelot, driven by Ray Minkai, was able to suppress the land-based Zagu and the other mechs, but now, the huge difference in size brought about all kinds of gaps, especially the energy output of the two mechs, would inevitably become a disadvantage for Lancelot at the moment. The Apsaras 3's particle cannon alone had already overloaded Lancelot's radiation shield. If it was the Mega Particle Cannon of the Apsaras 3, Lancelot would only end up with wreckage all over the ground. At this moment, there was no time to hesitate. As Lancelot's light wings spread, Ray Minkai decisively took the initiative to increase Lancelot's energy output to overload mode, forcibly increasing Lancelot's mobility from the original 100% to 150%. Whoosh! The air vibrated as Lancelot, who entered the overload mode, turned into a stream of light and rushed out of the attack range of the Apsaras 3 in an instant. Did he escape? But the performance of this new toy is not that simple. Amidst the cold snort of Miss Q, Kineas immediately put away the Apsaras 3's frame and issued a takeoff command to the flight system of the Apsaras 3. Boom! Amidst the buzzing of the Minovsky particles, the huge Apsaras 3 rose into the air and chased after Lancelot. Did he catch up? Without looking back, the shocking movement of the Apsaras 3 when it took off had already told Ray Minkai this fact. However, Ray Minkai was not afraid of the pursuit of the Apsaras 3. Although there is a huge gap in size and energy output, this is not a battlefield where victory can be decided by size. As if responding to Ray Minkai's words, the moment Lancelot was locked in the firing axis of the large-caliber Mega Particle Cannon, the Apsaras 3 decisively fired. In an instant, a huge beam of light stole the light of the sun at this moment and enveloped the entire sky in the light of the Mega Particle Cannon. Moreover, the buzzing of the Mega Particle Cannon as it tore through the sky echoed for a long time. With this momentum, this attack power, as long as one is hit, one will inevitably die without a burial place. However, just as Ray Minkai said, this sky is not a battlefield where the size of a piece of shit can dominate everything. At the moment when the huge beam of light broke through the sky, Lancelot, who has not yet exited the overload state, just gently turned over and dodged the shot of the Mega Particle Cannon while rapidly descending. However, this was not all of Lancelot's movements. Under the control of Ray Minkai, Lancelot took advantage of the moment when the light of the Mega particle cannon stole all the light in the sky to once again accelerate to the bottom of the Apsaras 3 and waved the radiation vibration sword in his hand. Clang! With a slash of the sword, the huge ball located at the bottom left of the Apsaras 3 was cut deep. Boom! There was a shake. A burst of sparks. The Apsaras 3, which had just taken off, fell toward the ground. Chapter 327. Miss Ina. Miss Ina. A hoarse but reassuring voice came from the darkness. Ina opened her eyes with difficulty and found that the face that appeared in front of her was actually a familiar face. She, not long ago, thought that the owner of this face had died in the battle. Norris, are you still alive? Ina endured the pain coming from all over her body and frowned as she called out the name of the face. Then, a big, warm hand helped Ina up and gently placed her on the other side, away from the wind. Miss Ina, drink some water first. Now, this battle may have nothing to do with us. As the cold water slid down her throat, Ina's gaze fell on the owner of the face holding the water bottle. The blood-soaked bandages covered more than half of the fierce face, as well as the thick and powerful arms and thighs. Ina, who had some medical knowledge, could tell at a glance that under this kind of injury, a normal person would not be able to move at all. However, the man named Norris in front of her didn't even blink when he came here and saved her. Norris, your injury? Norris suddenly laughed at Ina's question. He did not have the weak appearance of a seriously injured person in Ina's memory. Ha 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 ha. Miss Ina. I'm fine. Compared to this injury, Miss Ina should be more thankful that my opponent showed mercy. Otherwise, I would have to sacrifice myself with my old friends for the glory of the Sakhaline family. Norris, you, looking at the laughing Norris, Ina didn't know what to say for a moment. Let's not talk about this. That man is probably Miss Ina's sweetheart, right? As if to divert Ina's attention, Norris turned the topic to the figure lying on the other side. Ina heard this and looked back. It was Shiro Amada. Shiro! Ina exclaimed. Ignoring the pain coming from all over her body, she threw herself onto Shiro Amada. That anxious and worried look made Norris reveal a gratified smile that resembled that of an old father seeing his daughter finally find someone she loved. Ina, who was pouncing on Shiro Amada, didn't know this. When Norris found her, he saw with his own eyes how Shiro Amada used his own body to protect Ina in his arms, even though there were large burns on his back. That determination to protect Ina even at the cost of his life made Norris reveal a look of admiration. After that, Norris once again felt Shiro Amada's determination in his practice. Even though Shiro Amada had already fainted, his subconscious that was protecting Ina did not fade at all. Norris had to spend a lot of effort before he was able to separate the two of them and perform emergency treatment. Norris, is the scholar all right? In fact, even if Norris didn't say anything, Ina, who had medical knowledge, could tell the extent of Shiro Amada's injuries at a glance. There were large areas of burns on his back and arms. If this continued, even if they managed to escape from the beam of light, they would die from the subsequent inflammation and infection. I've given him all the antibiotics I can find. Now, it all depends on this man's luck and when this battle will end. Norris shook his head and gestured Ina to look in another direction. That's the Apsaras 3? How could it be? It actually fell. Also, what are those two beasts and the miniaturized aircraft? Ina's gaze followed Norris' gaze and was immediately shocked by the battle on the mountainside. Whether it was the Apsaras 3 or the Lancelot's miniaturized aircraft that had never appeared before, as well as the Tusk Lion Zero that was still rubbing the skeleton on the ground, they were all constantly impacting Ina's understanding of the world. At this moment, the battlefield had entered another stage. Kineas, is your work only at this level? Miss Q slightly let go of her hands and sighed. Kineas was speechless. because in the aggressive pursuit just now, Phineas thought he could rely on the power of the Apsaras 3 to crush Lancelot, but the small and nimble Lancelot, with its powerful mobility, gave Phineas a loud slap in the face. "It's just a buzzing fly." Although Phineas was unwilling in his heart, his mouth was still unforgiving. However, this sentence poked Miss Q's weakness. Phineas, you're right. No matter how annoying the sound of flapping wings is, it can't change the fact that it's still an insignificant fly. Miss Q chuckled and slightly raised her finger. "How long do you want to play, my cute pet?" Roar. Miss Q's voice had not yet faded when Skeleton, who was pressed to the ground by the Tusk Lion Zero, suddenly exerted force, and in the blink of an eye, it launched a force field that was enough to force the Tusk Lion Zero to retreat. Roar. Come on. The Tusk Lion Zero saw that Skeleton still had the strength to resist and immediately roared. At the same time, its four limbs exerted force and once again pounced on Skeleton. However, Skeleton did not fight back. Instead, when the Tusk Lion Zero flew up and pounced on it, it immediately turned and ran. Its speed was so fast that the Tusk Lion Zero could not react. Kai. That monster ran to your side. Seeing that its prey had run away, the Tusk Lion Zero was so angry that it could not fight back. Ray Minkai frowned slightly. Apparently, he could not see through the biochemical monster's intentions, but it could not stop Ray Minkai from intercepting it. However, the biochemical monster that was running at a high speed did not have the intention to entangle with Lancelot. It raised its head and spat out a strong beam of light towards Lancelot. Suddenly, it changed direction and quickly bypassed Lancelot, rushing towards Apsaras 3. TSK. What does it want to do? The Tusk Lion Zero's body flashed with blue light and the hunting gull equipment was immediately put on. It sped up and chased after Skeleton, trying to intercept it before it touched Apsaras 3. However, the Tusk Lion Zero's plan was doomed to fail. Because, the moment the hunting gull and the Tusk Lion appeared, Apsaras 3, who fell to the ground, moved. Hum, hum, hum. The ground in front of Apsaras 3 began to crack. Countless particles filled with huge amounts of energy began to wander along the cracks until the cracks could no longer accommodate their wanton wanderings and dissipated into the air. Boom! At the moment when the energy peak of the particle torrent reached its peak, a huge beam of light blasted towards the hunting gull and the Tusk Lion that was chasing after Skeleton. State 0. Get out of the way. In midair, Lancelot, who was trying to join forces with the hunting gull and the Tusk Lion to stop Skeleton, quickly pulled up. At the same time, Ray Minkai's reminder rang in State 0's ears. Roar! The hunting gull let out a roar of unwillingness. The two high-power plasma engines on its back were fully activated, and in an instant, all the thrust was given to the hunting gull. Bang! A strange sound was instantly drowned out by the huge sound wave caused by the huge beam of light shot out by Apsaras 3. However, the hunting gull lion that made this strange sound escaped far away from the shooting axis of Apsaras 3, leaving behind several afterimages in its wake. Humph! You run fast. That's the only thing that hasn't changed. Steel Lion. Seeing the hunting gull escape from Apsaras 3's shooting, Miss Q only snorted coldly and didn't care much about the failure of this attack. Phineas, do you really want to fulfill your ideals and dreams? Suddenly Miss Q's voice became low, as if she was tempting mortals to give up their lives and made a contract with them. Her voice kept ringing in Phineas's ears. Dreams? Ideals? Perhaps so. But now, I feel that my ideals and dreams have been fulfilled. Apsaras 3 has succeeded, and at the same time, it belongs to me. Miss Q, thank you for your cooperation. Miss Q's temptation didn't seem to succeed. Phineas's expression was still calm and his thoughts were still rational. Is that so? In front of them, you also feel that your ideals and dreams have been fulfilled? Miss Q's eyes moved as she pointed at Lancelot and the hunting gull that were trying to attack together. They are just flies. Kinnea's answer was decisive and resolute as Apsara's 3's particle beam cannon. Miss Q raised her eyebrows. Is that so? But no matter how much Kinnea's thinks that your ideals have been fulfilled, in my opinion, you still have a long way to go from your ideals. Miss Q paused, and her voice suddenly changed. It became very dignified, as if from now on, she was an empress that controlled supreme power. So, now, you have to listen to me. Kinnea's. Madam? Kinnea's body tensed up, and he realized that his body had unknowingly started to tremble. It was as if the woman sitting in front of him was a terrifying beast from ancient times. Don't show such an expression. Kinnea's. I still like the rational and calm Kinnea's. Miss Q turned around and gave Kinnea's a self-righteous and friendly smile. Now let's make a deal. I'll help you fulfill your ideals, and you have to do something for me. This is the principle of equivalent exchange that I believe in. Madam, what do you want to do? Kinnea's opened his mouth and suddenly realized that the monster named Skeleton had disappeared. When he was shocked by the aura emitted by Miss Q, it had already disappeared. Did you notice? My little cutie is a perfect match for your Apsara's 3. Miss Q smiled mysteriously and called out softly. Wake up, my little cutie. Roar! An earth-shattering roar instantly resounded in this world. At the same time, it made Kinnea's, who was sitting in the cockpit, dizzy. His ears buzzed, and he didn't have the slightest ability to resist. He could only struggle to survive in this roar like a small boat amidst the monstrous waves. That is, fusion? The sound waves created by the loud roar forced Lancelot, who was hovering in the air, to a great distance away. This allowed Mecha to witness with his own eyes the moment the monster named Skeleton crashed into Apsara's 3's body, and the instant it transformed. No, it just retrieved its power. In other words, this monster has eaten one of the countless fragments of our world. On the ground, the hunting gull solemnly looked at Apsara's 3, who was quickly drowning in Skeleton's biochemical tissue. Fragments? State 0. Do it. As soon as the voice sounded, Lancelot and the hunting gull moved together and attacked Apsara's 3 from above and below. In your dreams. Facing Lancelot's radiation-vibrating sword and the hunting gull's laser claws, Miss Q only snorted coldly. A force field was activated at full power in that instant, forcefully blocking the long swords and sharp claws of Lancelot and the hunting gull. Skeleton's force field. Mecha's eyes shrunk and immediately had a bad feeling. Apsara's 3, which already had a level 1 force field, with the addition of Skeleton's force field, wouldn't it be a hard bone to chew? State 0, retreat. If the attack did not succeed, retreat immediately. Mecha was very clear about this. Especially in this unclear situation, Mecha did not want to throw his life away. That monster is going to swallow that fragment. State 0 was also unwilling. I know. Again. Lancelot and the hunting gull's joint attack began again. On the other side, Ina and Norris, who had witnessed the entire battle, were speechless for a long time. The changes in the battle were so fast that Ina and Norris's knowledge was constantly challenged. Norris, was Apsara's 3 really created by my brother, Kinnea's Sakhaline? Ina put down her binoculars and fell into silence. If that Kinnea's Sakhaline is still the Kinnea's Sakhaline we know, then this Apsara's 3 was designed and built by him. Norris shook his head and sighed. Now, Apsara's 3 was actually swallowed by that monster. Ina and Norris could not accept such a change. Although, these changes were really happening in front of their eyes. Ina. Suddenly, a weak voice was heard. Shiro? Ina's face immediately showed a trace of surprise. She quickly turned around and helped Amida Shiro, who was gradually waking up. Aina. We have to go. Amata Shiro, who was enduring great pain, weakly said this sentence that confused Aina. Shiro? Where are we going? Go there. Amata Shiro raised his finger with difficulty and pointed at Apsara's 3, which was being swallowed by the remains. There's a voice in my head telling me that I have to go there. Cooperate with the second lieutenant and get rid of Apsara's 3. Otherwise, this world is finished. Chapter 328. Thump, thump, thump. Vaguely, the sound of a heartbeat sounded in Kenya's heart. This wasn't the sound of Kenya's own heartbeat, but the sound of an even stronger heart beating. Kenya's was very sure of this. However, even Kenya's had to admit that this heart was extremely strong. It could not move Kenya's. Don't touch my Apsara's 3. What? You're actually resisting the skeleton? The resistance that came from behind made Miss Q. She was stunned. She did not expect that there would be someone who would resist the skeleton. Just as Miss Q said before, although the skeleton's combat power was indeed objective, the skeleton's strongest point was not its own combat power, but its ability to act as an external armor for the target's body at a certain time. In other words, the biochemical monster's skeleton could fuse with the target's body and form a layer of strong and tough biochemical armor on the surface of the target's body. The force field that Rei Minkai and the long-toothed lion, State 0, were troublesome was one of its manifestations. However, in Miss Q's opinion, no one should be able to resist such a powerful force, but Kenya's actually resisted it. No. Don't touch my Apsara's 3. Apsara's is mine. Yes. This was Kenya's obsession. In order to complete Apsara's 3, Kenya's did not hesitate to lay hands on his colleagues. In order to complete Apsara's 3, Kenya's did not hesitate to poison and kill many of the technical staff who had followed him until now. Now, Kenya's was still showing his strong desire to monopolize as usual. Kenya's, be quiet. Miss Q. My Apsaras will never be given to anyone. An unexpected fight actually happened at this critical moment. However, Rei Minkai and State 0 did not know about this fight in the cockpit of Apsara's 3. Now they only knew that they had to find a way to break that troublesome force field as soon as possible. Otherwise, no matter how well Lancelot and the long-toothed lion cooperated, they would not be able to defeat it. Kai, quickly get down from Lancelot. Now, Lancelot's strength is no longer enough to pose a threat to this big guy. After many failed attempts to attack, State 0 decisively gave up the idea of continuing to attack in the form of a seagull, and suggested to Rei Minkai to switch. Yes, looks like this is the only way left. Although Lancelot was very good, he had indeed reached the limit of its combat power. Apsara's 3 and skeleton separately, Rei Minkai was confident that Lancelot could defeat them. However, with the combination of the two, Lancelot, who was only equipped with the radiant vibrating sword, Vari's rifle, and basic equipment such as the hook claw, would be unable to cope with the situation. Lancelot's turned quickly and rushed quickly down. Just as Lancelot was about to land on the ground, Rei Minkai jumped out of the cockpit that opened up. Lancelot, standby mode. While Lancelot was wrapped in a layer of liquid metal, Rei Minkai also landed steadily on the head of the long-toothed lion that caught him. Let's go. State 0. Roar! A gust of wind blew. When the hunting gulls and long-fanged lions reappeared in the forest, the azure armor on its body had turned into an orange color. On its head and waist, there were a total of 7 different swords of different lengths equipped on its head and waist. Long-toothed lion, Skonita. Roar. The roar of the king of beasts sounded like thunder, and the orange, flame-like figure arrived in a flash. Clang. The 5 short swords on Skonita's head were swung, and all the power was gathered at one point, piercing towards the force field that protected Apsara's 3 and skeleton. Destruction slash. This was one of Skonita's most powerful attacks. In the previous probing, Lei Minkai and State Zero had already tested out how difficult it was to deal with this layer of troublesome force field. Thus, they might as well go all out, and made a move that was as powerful as lightning. The full-powered attack of the long-fanged Lionheart was indeed effective. Even though the force field had blocked Skonita's sword in the beginning, it gradually lost in the confrontation between sword and shield, allowing Skonita's sword to slowly break through the defense of the force field, piercing through the force field. If this continued, the force field would definitely be pierced through by Skonita. However, the enemy was not the kind of villain that would only watch as his defense was broken, and at the same time, give a long speech. While I was dealing with Kinneas, you went to change into a new set of clothes? What a joke. Kinneas, who was still resisting the fusion of skeleton, had completely lost his voice. There was also the sound of the huge heart beating, which could be clearly heard. It was even accompanied by the beating of Jinha's heart, which had been operating under a high load for a long, long time. Kinneas, this is the only way to heal your frail body. So, in order to thank me for my kindness, you must show some sincerity. Yes, ma'am. Kinneas's face was dull, and his slightly lifeless eyes slowly moved, and landed on Skonita, who was about to break through the force field. Apsara's 3 will not be taken away by you. Goo! In the next second, the skeleton that was clinging to Apsara's 3's armor suddenly surged, and quickly spread biochemical tissues, and covered Apsara's 3's Zagohead. In the blink of an eye, a cannon appeared. 1. The rumbling of particle vibrations followed closely, and a cross-shaped crosshair that locked onto the long-fanged lion appeared in front of Kenya's eyes. Go to hell, evil person who covets Apsara's 3. Boom! The roar of the particles suddenly exploded, bombarding the long-fanged lion, Skonita, who was close at hand. State 0. Roar! Although Apsara's 3's attack was sudden, it was within the expectations of Lei Minkai and State 0. From the beginning, Lei Minkai and the rest did not think that the enemy would stupidly watch Skonita break through the force field and directly attack Apsara's 3's body. Therefore, Lei Minkai, who focused part of his attention on Apsara's 3's movements, immediately seized the opportunity. The moment the beam struck, he decisively made Skonita give up on attacking the force field, and accelerated to escape from the range of the beam. Troublesome. State Zero's gaze fell on the original Zagohead, which had turned into a beam cannon, and then extended forward, gradually turning into a head similar to Skeleton's head. Parasite? Lei Minkai suggested a possibility. No. It's just a forceful occupation. The pilot of this body is probably already controlled by that woman. Guy, find an opportunity to directly attack the core of the fragment. This is the only way to completely kill this monster. Skonita's body slightly crouched, like a lion about to hunt its prey, waiting for the opportunity to arrive. However, the enemy was not the grassland's herbivores. A beast will always be a beast. Kinneas. Continue. Miss. Q crossed her arms in front of her chest, and completely released her control authority. After relying on Skeleton to invade the cockpit's biological structure, and after controlling Kinneas, she had already assumed a posture of watching a show, and let Kinneas do as he wished. Yes, ma'am. Kinneas moved his hand, and Apsara's 3's diffuse beam cannon fired. Small beams of light, under the microcontrol of the refracting mirror, followed a path that would never repeat, and swept towards Skonita's position. It directly attacked the long-fanged lion, Skonita. Blocking Skonita's path of movement, everything was possible. State 0. The diffuse beam cannon not only had a large attack range, but its attack power was also terrifying. The attack that could destroy an entire Miz squad with just a light sweep was all used on the long-fanged lion, Skonita. It could be said that the attack was thunderous. Facing such a killing move, Lei Minkai and State 0 did not dare to be careless. Skonita's body flashed, and the Skonita equipment on its body changed into the seagull armor again, and rushed out of the diffuse beam cannon's attack range at full speed. It runs really fast. It does look a little like it did in the past. But, so what? Back then, it became a stray dog, and now, it will be the same. Miss Q looked at the Skonita and seagull dodging the diffuse beam cannon's attack, and her gaze gradually turned cold. State Zero did not recognize the wrong person. Miss Q was one of the culprits that destroyed Soth's mechanical beast. Her goal was not to kill, but to collect the fragments that were scattered everywhere when Soth's mechanical beast world collapsed, the fragments that Miss Q's organization called the World Core Fragments. Now Miss Q, who had traveled through several worlds, had a few fragments in her hand. Miss Q, who originally planned to go around this world and return, did not expect to meet the survivors of the world that was destroyed by her and her organization under such coincidental circumstances. That's good too. Being so lively, you must have a lot of fragments on you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be attracted by the fragment. Looking at the swift figure, Miss Q's eyes flashed with murderous intent, and then she raised both hands, and once again took control of Apsila's 3 in her hands. Kineas, cooperate with me. Kineas, who was in a daze, nodded slowly, and then put both hands on the keyboard, and entered a command to cooperate with Miss Q. Ka. 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 Immediately after, the biological tissue that had completely covered Apsila's 3 suddenly surged, and quickly evolved into a beam cannon with a diameter of at least 500 millimeters on both sides of Apsila's 3. 1. Without any reaction of charging, the moment these beam cannons were formed, the fierce beam attack had already begun. The beam was fast and fierce, causing the long-toothed lion, hunting gull, who had just escaped from the range of the beam cannons, to once again fall into a terrifying beam storm. Troublesome. Kai. Quickly think of a way to deal with this broken thing. The sullen feeling of only being able to run back and forth in the beam storm made State Zero extremely unhappy. It did not expect that the skeleton that it had pressed to the ground and rubbed back and forth would become so troublesome after seizing control of Apsila's 3. I'm thinking of a way. Ray Minkai's gaze had never left the enemy from the beginning. Therefore, Ray Minkai also saw a pattern. As long as the long-toothed lion, hunting gull, or Skonita discovered the weakness of Apsila's 3 and attacked it, the monster that had discovered the mutation would definitely make up for the weakness immediately, and strengthen the attack on the long-toothed lion. Such a method gave Ray Minkai a headache. Perhaps the weakness was not difficult to discover. But the difficult part was how to launch a fatal attack the moment the weakness was discovered. As long as the action was slightly delayed, the enemy would definitely make up for its weakness based on the long-toothed lion's reaction. There is only one chance. Yes, there was only one chance. Norris endured the waves of headache, and looked at the steel shell that had descended from the sky, and the group of Federation soldiers that walked out of it. Not to mention the heavy cannon that the soldiers had pulled down from the steel shell, which was much longer than Norris had imagined. Just the fact that the Federation soldiers actually ignored him, a high-ranking Guion army soldier who had been fighting against the Federation on the front lines all year round, was enough to make Norris confused. Could it be that these people are not from the Federation army? While Norris was confused, Shiro Amada was also struggling to walk toward the steel shell with Ayane's help. After taking a few steps, a young man in logistics attire walked out from the group of Federal soldiers who were pulling down the super-long heavy artillery. He quickly walked up to Shiro Amada, stood straight and saluted Shiro Amada, and said, "Sir, Shiro Amada, I'm sorry. General, your heavy particle cannon has been delivered, please give your orders." General? Shiro Amada did not speak, but Aina was shocked by the young man's address. "I'm just a second lieutenant. I'm not a general." Shiro Amada slowly shook his head, then glanced at the heavy ion cannon that the young man spoke of, and nodded. "Thank you for your hard work. Please equip it on the Easy 8. The Easy 8 should still be able to be activated now." "Yes, General." Obviously, Shiro Amada's denial did not correct the young man's address. In other words, the young man was not calling Shiro Amada, but a man with the same name. "Shiro, what is going on?" Aina looked at the young man who turned around and left, and softly asked her doubts. "Aina, trust me." Shiro Amada shook his head, and his clear eyes looked at Aina. "Now, the most important thing is to stop your brother, Kenya's. As for the other things, after everything is over, I will tell you everything." Chapter 329. Gale. Afterimage. At this moment, it was constantly revolving around Apsara's 3. During this period, the beam attacks evolved from the biochemical tissues attached to Apsala's 3 were mixed in the whirlwind, locking on to the azure figure like a gust of wind. "TSK, you really don't want to let go." State Zero's eyes flashed with anger. Obviously, it had been forced to the point of being badly battered by Apsara's 3's beam storm. "Steady." Ray Minkai calmly comforted State Zero. As the other half of State Zero, Ray Minkai's existence was necessary. For example, under the current situation, State Zero was forced to dodge everywhere, and was unable to close the distance with Apsara's 3. Calmness became especially important. Otherwise, State Zero, who was faintly controlled by anger, would probably explode on the spot and disregard the danger, just to give Apsara's 3 a fierce blow and put itself in fatal danger. Roar. "How can I steady myself? This damn woman, she only has these despicable means." State Zero's angry voice echoed in the cockpit for a long time. In this regard, Ray Minkai could not find any effective way for the time being. Since Skeleton merged with Apsara's 3, the layer of force field had the ability to resist beam and live ammunition attack. Whether it was the Longfong Lion, Hunter Gull, or the Longfong Lion, their attacks could not break through this layer of troublesome force field. Perhaps even the Longfong Lion in the Bonza form could not break through it. However, Ray Minkai did not dare to try this point. Because, in the Bonza form, the Longfong Lion's mobility was almost zero. Although the heavy equipment would not crush the Longfong Lion, it would severely restrict the Longfong Lion's movements. The Longfong Lion's mobility was equivalent to zero. In this situation where there was a beam storm everywhere, it was undoubtedly courting death. Contradiction. It was really contradictory. The Bonza form with the strongest attack power could not be used, and the Hunter Gull form and Shunada form could not break through Apsara's 3's force field because of the lack of attack power. If only there was a high-power beam weapon. Ray Minkai's eyes flashed as he thought of a possibility. Ray Minkai speculated that even though the previous attack on Jim was blocked by the I force field, after merging with Skeleton's force field, Ray Minkai made a bold conjecture. Perhaps, after the fusion of two different force fields, there would be some loopholes due to compromise. If these loopholes really existed, it might be the opportunity for Ray Minkai and State Zero to defeat Apsara's 3. Just that, no matter how bold a conjecture was, it was still a conjecture. The long-fanged lion, which lacked a beam weapon, could not verify Ray Minkai's speculation. "Kai, have you thought of a way?" Ray Minkai's strange behavior was instantly captured by State Zero, who was eager to find a way out of this sullen beating. "Yes." It couldn't be considered a solution. It's just that we lack effective weapons right now. Ray Minkai nodded and admitted his thoughts. Weapons? State Zero was stunned. Under State Zero's control, the long-fanged lion Hunter Gull slammed on the brakes and avoided the beam sweeping from the front. He turned around and sped up to retreat, quickly widening the distance between him and Apsara's 3. Want to escape? Kinya's. The sudden change of the long-fanged lion Hunter Gull stunned Mosq. In her opinion, the steel beast did not retreat even half a step in the dense and terrifying beam storm. It even took the risk to approach Apsara's 3 at all costs. It was undoubtedly a synonym for stupidity. However, the sudden retreat of the long-fanged lion hunter gull caused Mosq to have a trace of doubt. However, Mosq, who had the upper hand at this moment, did not pay too much attention to this matter. In her opinion, the long-fanged lion hunter gull's retreat was nothing more than a struggle to survive under Apsara's 3's terrifying attack. Rumble! The roar of the Minovsky particles kept ringing. Apsara's 3, whose body was covered in a layer of pulsating biochemical tissue, chased after the long-fanged lion hunter gull at a leisurely pace. It was as if victory was in its grasp and it was waiting for its prey to bleed to the last drop of blood. State 0, who had the long-fanged lion hunter gull run all the way, could not care less. As he ran, he explained to Ray Minkai, "Kai, is your method similar to using other weapons to attack that troublesome layer of force field?" Yes. What surprised Ray Minkai was that State 0 did not seem to be as impatient as before, and his thoughts were exceptionally clear. "I know what you want to say about the weapon. In the end, that kind of weapon would never appear in the long-fanged lion's equipment sequence. No wonder you are not confident." State 0's voice gradually revealed a trace of pride. "However, it is also thanks to the fragments of this world. After I swallowed the fragments used by the engines, I discovered that some changes have occurred in my various forms." Changes! The scene in front of him kept retreating, and the light beams that came from behind blasted a deep pit on the ground on both sides of the long-fanged lion hunter gull. However, none of these attracted Ray Minkai's attention. The only thing that attracted Ray Minkai was the changes that State 0 mentioned. Yes, changes. Although those fragments have been processed, I managed to analyze some things from them. Things? Is it equipment? A new equipment form? Ray Minkai asked while paying attention to the light beam attack from behind. Yes. In the light beam storm, State 0's voice suddenly became louder. At the same time, 2 golden lights burst out from the long-fanged lion hunter gull's eyes, drawing out 2 long, flame-like golden trails. "This is the new equipment I have obtained. Just watch. Kai. This is your partner, the new form of the long-fanged lion hunter gull. Roar!" Boom! In the midst of the long-fanged lion hunter gull's roar, Apsara's 3, who was following behind, also shot out a light beam that was enough to drown the long-fanged lion hunter gull. The mighty light beam that destroyed the path ahead swallowed the long-fanged lion hunter gull in the blink of an eye. However, Miss Q did not feel the disappearance of the long-fanged lion hunter gull. Instead, she felt a rising aura that made her feel more and more uncomfortable. Roar! The light beam faded, but the huge steel beast was still there. Moreover, the azure armor on its body was turning into a stream of light that disappeared along with the light beam. This was not caused by Apsara's 3's attack, but by the long-fanged lion hunter gull taking the initiative to remove the azure armor on its body. Because it was to equip the new equipment obtained from State 0. Miss Q. Just watch. This is the roar of the world that you have destroyed. The roar of the steel lion resounded through the sky at this moment, and also shook the mountain. What? That form? This isn't the power of that broken world. Miss Q's originally confident expression of victory was shaken at this moment. The long-fanged lion hunter gull, no, it should be the long-fanged lion with the new equipment. An inverted triangular curved goggles extended down from the top of the long-fanged lion hunter gull's head, protecting the eyes of the long-fanged lion hunter gull. At the same time, 2 streams of light rose from the limbs of the long-fanged lion hunter gull and quickly spread up. 2 sci-fi-shaped cannon barrels with a length of nearly 20 meters appeared on the left and right sides of the long-fanged lion hunter gull, and were firmly fixed by the fixed claws that extended from the waist of the long-fanged lion hunter gull to both sides. In addition, the plasma engine that the long-fanged lion hunter gull often carried had been replaced by 2 nuclear furnace reactors with powerful output. They were bound to be the powerful energy source for the long-fanged lion hunter gull's 2 newly acquired heavy particle cannons. Roar! At the moment when the 2 heavy particle cannons were replaced, black lines that flickered with a faint light appeared on the body of the long-fanged lion hunter gull. These black lines were not as simple as the aesthetic appearance, but some measures were taken when the long-fanged lion hunter gull obtained the new equipment, taking into account the heat dissipation problem of the equipment. Roar! Under the goggles, the long-fanged lion's golden eyes were overflowing with murderous intent. Kai! Attack! I will use this new set of equipment to defeat that hateful woman. The angry roar of the long-fanged lion hunter gull shook Rei Minkai's ears for a long time. What responded to it was not Rei Minkai's words, but Rei Minkai did not hesitate to press the start button of the new equipment. Prism light? Is it the result of absorbing the Minovsky reactor? In the blink of an eye, a holographic projection appeared in front of Rei Minkai's eyes. Apsara's 3's silhouette appeared on it, and a red cross light flashing on its body was firmly locked onto it. Chance, Kai. Use the prism light to kill it. The long-fanged lion with 2 heavy particle cannons on its back lowered its body slightly, and the 2 heavy particle cannons on both sides of its waist immediately raised their muzzles, aiming the flashing cannon muzzles at Apsara's 3. Humph! It's just a change of appearance. How can it defeat my little cutie? Although Miss Q said that she looked down on the long-fanged lion, in fact, she wanted Jinhas to fully activate Apsara's 3's Mega particle cannon in an attempt to kill the long-fanged lion hunter gull in one shot. The light of the particles caused the 2 small suns to slowly rise, taking away all the surrounding light, leaving only the 2 small suns that were competing to release their brightest light. In the increasingly dazzling light, the light of these 2 small suns was enough to drown everything in the moment. Chance! Rei Minkai and Miss Q shouted at the same time, and their hands pressed the attack button at the same time. Rumble! The 2 light pillars instantly erupted, and in the roar that almost blended into one, went straight towards each other. In the next second, in the open space between the long-fanged lion hunter gull and Apsara's 3, they fiercely collided together. Boom! Thunder! No, it should be said that it was an explosion that was almost like the end of the world in a fairy tale, and the loud explosion instantly resounded through the world, shaking the tropical rainforest that had been violently bombed and destroyed by man-made earthquakes for a long time. No one knew what the result of the collision of these 2 terrifying light pillars was. The only thing that was known was that at the place where the 2 collided, a huge pit with a diameter of 100 meters and a depth of 10 meters was blasted out. Hee! How is it? How's the power of the new weapon? The muzzles of the 2 heavy particle cannons still had the residual reaction left by the particle explosion, and the goggles were flowing with streams of light. State Zero's voice had a hint of pride. It was impossible not to be proud. The layer of force field that gave Rei Minkai and State Zero a headache, and even made State Zero almost go berserk, was now broken. Countless energy lightning constantly jumped on Apsara's 3's body, and the layer of force field that provided Apsara's 3 with a strong defensive ability not long ago actually failed. This result was unacceptable to Miss Q. How can it be? The fusion force field of Apsara's 3 and skeleton actually failed? Woman, want to know the reason? But I won't tell you. State Zero's proud voice sounded, but he did not tell Miss Q the reason why the force field failed. Kai, do it. Rei Minkai nodded and moved his hands. The long-fanged lion hunter gull. No, it should be called the long-fanged lion hunter gull now. The 2 heavy particle cannons on his back separated again, and extended forward until they were about 5 meters away from Hunter Gull's head before stopping. Then, a trace of energy lightning burst out from the part where the reactor and the cannon were connected, and rushed forward along the cannon until it reached the front of the cannon, in front of Hunter Gull's head. Vroom 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 vroom. Lei Mingkai pulled the trigger forcefully as the particles emitted a sizzling sound of energy tearing through the void. Boom! At this moment, it was like the scene where Apsara's 3 used the large-caliber Mega particle cannon to bombard the long-fanged lion hunter gull. It was just that the attacker and the defender had swapped positions. Kineas dodged quickly. Kineas, who had been reduced to a tool, had a quick reaction. He did not wait for Miss Q's order, and under the influence of the nervous system connected to skeleton, he subconsciously controlled Apsara's 3 to dodge. In this way, Apsara's 3 indeed managed to avoid the bombardment of the long-fanged lion hunter gull. However, whether it was Apsara's 3 or the long-fanged lion hunter gull, they had overlooked one existence. That was Amada Shiro and the others, who had been in a state of retreat since the beginning of the battle. In the ruins, the heavy ion cannon sent here by Steel Bailey was steadily raised by Easy 8, and it locked onto Apsara's 3, who was dodging the long-fanged lion hunter gull. Aina, attack. Now is your chance. Both of them had their right hand on the trigger, and the moment Apsara's 3 rose from the ground and successfully dodged the long-fanged lion hunter gull's attack, Amada Shiro shouted loudly. Boom! In an instant, the heavy ion cannon broke through the void and headed straight for Apsara's 3. Chapter 330. Like a thunderbolt. In a situation where both sides were caught off guard, the heavy particle beam fired by the heavy ion cannon controlled by Easy 8 crossed the void in an instant and penetrated the armor of Apsara's 3 as if it was nothing. At this moment, time seemed to have stopped. What? There's actually an enemy hiding here. In a split second, Miss Q thought of a possibility. Aina Sakhaline. Even though Kineas had already confirmed Aina Sakhaline's death, Miss Q's first thought was Aina, who died in Kineas's mouth. Aina Sakhaline might have taken advantage of the fierce battle between Apsara's 3 and the Steel Lion to launch a sneak attack and successfully hit Apsara's 3. Furthermore, Miss Q's eyebrows were tightly knitted together. The data displayed on the screen in front of her, as well as the turbulence that surged like a tide after Apsara's 3 was hit, indicated that Apsara's 3 might not be able to hold on for much longer. Kineas, you, in the bumpy cockpit of the Apsara's 3, just as Miss Q's voice sounded, a cold touch suddenly appeared on the back of Miss Q's smooth neck. Miss, you better not move. Kineas's voice was filled with pain, as if he had crawled out from an abyss of incomparable pain. Yes. In the direct hit of the heavy particle cannon just now, the neural control system controlling Kineas had collapsed. But at the same time, the pain caused by the heavy particle cannon to the nervous system was transmitted to Kineas's body. This incomparable pain woke Kineas up from the control, but at the same time, it also caused his spirit to suffer a heavy blow. Now, there were no other enemies in his eyes, only Miss Q, who had suddenly merged skeleton with Apsara's 3 and took the opportunity to control it. Hearing Kineas's voice, Miss Q's mind suddenly flashed with several thoughts like lightning. Kineas had escaped from Skeleton's control. The reason was that the sudden sneak attack had actually hit Skeleton's control core, destroying the neural control center in one fell swoop, causing the entire neural control system to collapse and also allowing Kineas to regain his sense of self. The last point was what Miss Q was most worried about. She knew very well that even if the Steel Lion in front of her was a huge threat to Skeleton, it would not know where Skeleton's true weakness was. Without a doubt, the attack just now was aimed at Skeleton's weak point. Furthermore, he had succeeded. In this world, no one knew where Skeleton's weakness was. The only possibility was that the fleet that had been chasing behind him belonged to a combat unit. With a myriad of thoughts, Miss Q made the most suitable decision for the current situation. Apsara's 3, which was penetrated by the heavy particle cannon, wobbled and landed on the ground. The sound of the Miss Q slowed down. "What are you doing, Sir Kenias? Right now we are in the middle of a fierce battle with the enemy. Could it be that you want to kill me at this time?" This question, which was close to a scolding, did not affect Kenia's emotions. On the contrary, the cold touch pressed harder against Miss Q's neck. "Ma'am, you and I both know what you've done to me. I don't care if you want to use me. However, you want to steal my Apsalas. This is an unforgivable sin." Kenias completely ignored the existence of Easy 8, who was firing the heavy particle cannon, and Prism Light, who was trying to take advantage of the situation. Now, in his eyes, there was only the closest enemy to him, the woman who was once his ally, Miss Q. Sin? Ridiculous. Kenias, who was it that gave you the confidence to develop Apsaras? Who gave your laughable project a chance to come back from the dead? Miss Q slowly turned around and fearlessly faced the muzzle of Kenia's gun. Since Kenias was not afraid of Prism Light, who was taking advantage of Apsalas 3's setback, Miss Q naturally had nothing to fear. "Yes, it's you, ma'am. However, Apsalas is mine. I won't allow anyone to take it away. Even if it's you, it's the same." Kenia's voice was cold, but his face still showed the pain of being freed from the control of the skeleton's nerves. However, this did not affect the viciousness in Kenia's heart and his determination to not allow anyone to take away his Apsalas. When the trigger was pulled, there was no sound left for Miss Q to explain. Bang! A gunshot sounded. Miss Q's smile, which was enough to charm all men in the world, was pierced by a bullet that whizzed out of the barrel. The black and crimson hole tore apart Miss Q's appearance and also pushed her beautiful body to the back. As her fiery red hair flew, Kenia's face was cold, and his finger that pulled the trigger was decisive and ruthless. Bang! Bang! Kachi! As the gunshots rang out, the cockpit door of the Apsaras 3 opened. In an instant, a gust of wind swept into the cockpit and swept up Miss Q's bloody body, dragging her out of the cockpit and towards the ground. "Goodbye, Miss Q. Thank you." Kenias let go of his right hand and threw the pistol that killed Miss Q out of the cockpit, and quickly sat back in his seat. Now, Apsalas 3 finally belonged to him alone. "Fly, Apsalas 3. I know your strength is definitely not limited to this. Perhaps it was the influence of Skeleton's biochemical armor, or perhaps it was Apsalas 3 responding to its owner, its creator." Apsalas 3, which was pierced by the heavy particle cannon, suddenly stopped its retreating figure, and suddenly rose from the ground, flying in the sky once again. "What? It can actually fly." On the ground, Ray Minkai looked at Apsalas 3, which was pierced by the attack that came out of nowhere, in shock. Logically speaking, no matter how powerful this thing was, it should not have the ability to continue fighting after receiving such a powerful attack. Its skeleton. After State Zero mentioned a possibility, he showed a scene in front of Ray Minkai. In the scene, a woman wearing a long skirt, with fiery red hair flowing with bright red blood, fell heavily on a pile of rocks not far away. "Miss Q, yes. It's her. I didn't expect her to die in the hands of her own people." State Zero's voice was filled with regret. However, in the next moment, the woman who was supposed to be dead suddenly twitched. In the midst of her trembling body, the wounds that were pierced by the bullets quickly rolled. In the blink of an eye, the bullets that tore through her body not long ago were expelled from the depths of her body, and the hole-like wounds were healed. Other than the long skirt that was full of holes, the wounds on Miss Q's body were healed just like that. High-speed regeneration. Looking at Miss Q, who gradually stood up from the pile of rocks, Ray Minkai said the same word again. "It really hurts. Men are indeed cold-blooded creatures. No matter which world it is, after using people, they always give them the gift of death." Roar! Suddenly, the sound of wind rose. In a flash of golden light, The pile of rocks that Miss Q was standing on was smashed into pieces by the pure white steel lion's paw. However, the woman who was supposed to be smashed into pieces by the lion's paw, Miss Q, appeared on the other side. Don't think that after I lose my body, I'm a little girl who can be trampled on. Little kitty. You underestimate me. Boom! Before Miss Q finished speaking, a beam of light suddenly descended from the sky and swallowed Miss Q's figure. The one who launched this attack was actually Apsila's 3, controlled by Kinneas. At this moment, the two parties who were fighting just now had the same thought. That was to kill Miss Q. Kinneas, I have already given up on Apsila's 3. I no longer care about your crime of shooting at me. Why are you still hindering me? In a flash of light, Miss Q's figure appeared on the other side again. However, unlike before, Miss Q's dress seemed to have become much more tattered. For those who have designs on Apsila's 3, only death can make me feel at ease. Kinneas's answer was straightforward and decisive. Moreover, the action of his hands was even more ruthless. Even if Apsila's 3 was pierced through, it could still rely on the biochemical tissue of the skeleton to continue to maintain a certain degree of attack power. Therefore, Kinneas did not hesitate to set Miss Q as his first target to kill. He knew that the skeleton that could provide power for Apsila's 3 would very likely become paralyzed under Miss Q's command. In order to ensure that Apsila's 3's power system continued to operate, it was fine to eliminate the root of the problem. For Kinneas, Miss Q would definitely die. Kinneas, don't be too ungrateful. Kinneas had repeatedly expressed his intention to get rid of her, which had already infuriated Miss Q. However, the long-fanged lion, Prism Light, who was waiting at the side, would not let go of any opportunity to kill Miss Q. As long as Miss Q relaxed a little, what awaited her was the long-fanged lion's merciless sharp claws. Schwa! A golden light flashed, the light beams scattered, Miss Q's figure flashed back and forth. When she appeared on the other side again, Miss Q's hand movements paused. Is there only the last space movement left? The two sides, who were originally enemies, actually burst out with astonishing tacit understanding when facing the same enemy that they wanted to kill. One by one, used up the special equipment that Miss Q held. How hateful! Men, as expected, are all bad things. However, I'll let it go today. Since you guys like to fight so much, then I'll let you fight to your heart's content. Looking at the two sides that joined forces to attack, Miss Q did not get angry. Instead, she laughed. She slowly raised her hand and snapped her fingers. Skeleton, remove the limit on output. Full overload mode, activate. With a command, Apsara's 3's movements suddenly paused. Immediately after, the biological tissue covering Apsara's 3 suddenly became violent. In the blink of an eye, it quickly spread through the gaps in Apsara's 3's armor and crazily seized control of Apsara's 3. Even Kinneas, who was sitting in the cockpit of Apsara's 3, was not spared. Kinneas, who had just broken free from the nerve control, was controlled again. No matter how much he struggled, the fact that he was controlled again could not be changed. Roar! The moment countless nerve tentacles drowned Kinneas, a monster-like roar suddenly sounded from Apsara's 3's body. Kinneas, what a pity! Originally, I quite liked you. In the end, it's because you asked for trouble. See you again. Kinneas! Roar! The golden light slammed down, but Miss Q's figure disappeared again. Moreover, after disappearing this time, Miss Q's existence seemed to have disappeared from this world, leaving only a light laugh. Goodbye, Steel Lion. It's rare for you to be able to escape from the destruction of the world. Then, let's meet again in the future. I hope that you will bring me more surprises by then. However, for now you should play with my little cutie. Goodbye. Roar! Prism Light, the long-fanged lion, raised its sharp claws that created a deep pit on the ground. Looking at the empty pit, it let out an angry roar. State 0, calm down. Now we have a bigger problem to deal with. Ray Minkai was not surprised by Miss Q's escape. As the culprit who could destroy Soth's robot world, how could she not have a few trump cards in her hands? To be able to force her to this point, perhaps it was Ray Minkai and State Zero's luck. Trouble? State Zero's anger was burning fiercely. It was rare to meet an enemy who destroyed his home world in this vast universe. How could State Zero, who could only watch his enemy escape, not feel angry? Hence, the enraged State Zero instantly turned Apsila's 3 into a punching bag. 1. With a flash of light, the long-fanged lion, Prism Light's heavy beam cannon and nuclear furnace reactor turned into a stream of light and quickly reformed into a blue armor on the long-fanged lion's body. Hunting gull form. The 2 plasma engines instantly spewed out 2 dazzling flames and unreservedly gave all their powerful thrust to the long-fanged lion. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the long-fanged lion, which had transformed into a hunting gull form, broke through the sound barrier and entered the supersonic state. It turned into a blue stream of light and directly attacked Apsara's 3. Die. Monster! No matter how you transform, I will tear you apart. The angry State Zero urgently needed a punching bag. Otherwise, it would definitely be suffocated by the anger of letting Miss Q escape. Bang! Under the supersonic speed, the long-fanged lion and hunting gull's laser claws had terrifying power. With just one attack, it had scratched a deep hole in Apsara's 3's biochemical armor that had already spread all over its body. However, the damage caused by this powerful attack was still somewhat lacking under the effects of high-speed regeneration. If once is not enough, then twice. Today I will tear you apart. Kai. State Zero's anger had reached its peak. Now, Ray Minkai had already given up the idea of appeasing State Zero, who was already in a state of anger. The only thing he could do was to kill Apu Salis 3 with the Tusked Lion's Zero style. The original appearance of the Apu Salis 3 was no longer recognizable. Chapter 331. The visual impact of the exposed and constantly pulsating vasculature was astonishing. In Iona's 20 years of life, she had never seen such a horrifying scene. Easy 8's electronic eyes faithfully displayed the horrifying appearance of Apsila's 3 in front of Ina. It has already become like this. It can still move? Brother, what kind of monster did Kinneas create? The huge wound caused by the heavy particle cannon was still there, but it was gradually covered by the rapidly spreading biochemical tissue and was replaced by new tissue and armor on the wound that was enough to paralyze Apsila's 3. No, the current Apsila's is no longer the Apsila's that Kinneas created. Instead, he became a monster from head to toe. The heavy particle cannon's recharge was already completed, and the next attack was ready. Shiro Amada stared at Apsila's 3, which was still able to resist the fierce attacks of the lion seagull, and once again locked onto Apsila's 3. This time, Apsila's 3 must be destroyed. Bang! The laser claw was once again repelled by the layer of biochemical armor. The lion seagull somersaulted in the air and landed steadily on the ground. So troublesome! So troublesome! Although State Zero was still shouting the same words after escaping from Miss Q, it gradually calmed down in the midst of the battle. This change made Lei Minkai secretly heave a sigh of relief. Although the attacks of the enraged long-fanged lions were powerful, the risks brought about by their reckless attacks were equally huge. Fortunately, State Zero had calmed down. State Zero, continue. Ray Minkai's gaze slightly looked in a certain direction and made the decision to continue the attack. What? If we continue to rely on the seagull form, we won't be able to break this monster's tortoise shell. State Zero was stunned and did not seem to understand Ray Minkai's decision. Do it. Now what we need to do is to restrain Apsila's 3. Restrain? In an instant, State Zero understood Ray Minkai's intention. The memory of the attack that had pierced through Apsila's 3 was still fresh in his mind. If he guessed correctly, Ray Minkai was betting that the person who shot the powerful beam was still lurking nearby, waiting for an opportunity to deal a fatal blow to Apsara's 3. Alright. Thus, the lion-hunting gull continued to circle around Apsila's 3 at high speed. At the same time, it waited for an opportunity to attack Apsila's 3 with its laser claws. However, even though it seemed like the lion seagull was in control of these movements, Apsila's 3's injuries had already been healed. Under the surging of biochemical tissues, the beam cannons that were twisted into shape began to fire at the lion seagull. As the beam attacks became more and more concentrated, Apu the Lost 3 turned into a hedgehog full of spikes. The lion and hunting gull had fewer and fewer opportunities to attack. Still not done? State Zero growled. Wait a little longer. Ray Minkai was also a little anxious in his heart, but he knew that the person who launched that attack must have been waiting for an opportunity. Moreover, he also knew that this person was most likely Shiro Amada. The azure wind constantly left afterimages around Apsila's 3, trying to block all of Apsila's 3's movement routes. Even though this strategy was simple, because Apsila's 3's pilot, Kenya's, was controlled by Skeleton, a monster that had its restrictions lifted, he could not see through Lion and Ray Minkai's simple strategy. He could only follow the instincts of Skeleton, a monster that had completely controlled Apsila's 3, to attack. However, he could only be restricted to a certain area by Lion and Hunting Gull. Even though his attacks were fierce, he could not touch Lion and Hunting Gull. Similarly, Lion and Hunting Gull were in the same situation. They ran fast, but they could not cause any damage to Apsila's 3's tough biochemical armor. Thus, the two sides were in a stalemate. However, this stalemate was what Ray Minkai had been waiting for. Beep beep. The locking system sounded the final notification. Shiro. Attack. Aina retracted her gaze, no longer looking at Apsila's 3 that had been changed beyond recognition by the biochemical armor. She knew that Kenya's, who was sitting inside Apsila's 3, could no longer be called a human. Okay. Shiro Amada nodded slowly and pulled the trigger decisively. Virum. In the instant that a shocking amount of heavy particles burst out from the cannon, a strong wind pressure was generated around the muzzle of the cannon. The wind pressure surged out in all directions, almost blowing Norris, who was watching the battle from the side, off his feet. The sky darkened at this moment. It was as if only the dazzling light of the heavy particle beam was left. Forward! Forward! Forward again! The heavy particles that contained indestructible energy let out a frenzied roar that could obliterate everything. They headed straight for Apsila's 3, who was pinned down by the Longfong Lion Hunting Gull within a certain range. The dazzling light arrived in an instant, not giving Apsila's 3 any time to escape, even though the monster that had eroded Apsila's 3 instinctively sensed the fatal danger. Virum. The huge, powerful light beam broke through the void and flashed in front of Ray Minkai's eyes. Another hole appeared on Apsila's 3's body, penetrating through just like the previous hole. Zap! The residual energy sparks of the heavy particles frantically jumped back and forth on the hole, wantonly entangling with the sparks that came out of Apsila's 3's wound, and then a loud explosion occurred. Crackle boom! The explosion occurred. State 0. Quick! Roar! The moment the thick smoke rose from Apsila's 3's body, Lion and Hunting Gull stomped on the ground, and the plasma engine on its back exploded with a powerful thrust. Amidst the afterimages, the Lion Hunter Gull had already rushed to the front of the Apsila's 3 and leaped onto it. Virum! The light flashed, and the blue armor on Lion and Hunting Gull's body instantly shattered. At the same time, the shattered light condensed again, and the flame-like orange-red armor was draped over the lion's body. Lion and Shunida. Clang! The blade was unsheathed. It was close at hand. The 5 swords on the head of the long-fanged lion, Shunida, let out a crisp sword hum in unison. With the help of the powerful inertia, the swords pierced into the cockpit of Apsala's 3 in one fell swoop. Kinneas, goodbye. When the blade broke open the cockpit door, Lei Minkai saw the man who was wrapped in a mess of biological tissues that jumped around from time to time. This must be Isaac Sakaline's brother, Kinneas Sakaline. The biological tissues that occupied the entire cockpit did not have the defensive power of Apsala's 3's biological armor that gave it a strong defensive power. Lion and Shunida's blade only touched it lightly, and the disgusting biological tissues were instantly shattered, revealing Kinneas's lifeless face. Then Lion and Shunida's blade pierced through Kinneas without any hindrance. The intense pain of the blade piercing through his body woke Kinneas up from the control of Skeleton's nerves, but he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. The flame of his life was about to be extinguished in the next moment. Ugh! Poha! Bright red blood spurted out from his mouth. Dead? Am I dead? Kinneas lowered his head and looked at the huge blade that pierced through his body, and understood. Sure enough, I still lost. My dream! Creak! The sound of metal twisting came from all directions as Kinneas was dying. The biological tissues that occupied Apsala's 3's body also began to shrink, twisting and struggling. Follow me down to hell, monster! At the moment when the flame of his life was about to be extinguished, Kinneas used all his strength to press the red button on the right side. Gotcha! Suddenly, Lei Minkai's mind flashed by lightning. State 0. Quick! He's going to self-destruct. Roar! The long-fanged lion suddenly raised its head and pulled out the blade that was inserted into the cockpit. At the same time, it fiercely stomped on Apsara's 3 and leaped high into the air. From the top of Apsara's 3, it flipped its body and stabbed straight at Apsara's 3 with its head down and tail up. Roar! Prepare to die. The orange lightning flashed, and a hole several meters wide appeared on the back of Apsala's 3, reaching all the way to the center. Boom! Rumble! The moment Shunida pierced through Apsala's 3's huge body, the countdown timer of Apsala's 3's self-destruction also reached 0. A violent explosion that engulfed everything within a kilometer radius instantly occurred. However, amidst the explosion, Amada Shiro, Aina, and the others secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Apsala's 3's self-destruction did not cause the nuclear explosion that they had imagined. Even if the power of the self-destruction was terrifying, it was still much better than a nuclear explosion. At least they survived. Lion, that steel lion! Aina was shocked. She immediately recalled the long-fanged lion, Shunida, that had charged into Apsala's 3's body before it self-destructed. Don't worry. That lion is fine. Amada Shiro shook his head and comforted Aina. In the midst of the blazing storm that stretched for hundreds of meters, a ray of light suddenly broke through the billowing smoke and slowly appeared in front of Aina, Shiro Amada, and Norris, who had finally peeked out from behind cover. Lion. A huge and mighty steel lion. Different from the feeling of watching the fierce battle from afar, when this huge steel lion really appeared in front of everyone at a close distance, the visual impact was far more stimulating than when they were watching from the sidelines. What's more, at this moment, this steel lion wearing orange armor and equipped with 7 sharp swords of different lengths was biting a mysterious object that flashed with colorful brilliance. World fragment. Sure enough, this lion is the lion that the princess mentioned. Aina suddenly felt that Amada Shiro had become a little strange, and she could not understand what he was saying. However, Amada Shiro turned around and smiled at Aina. Aina. Trust me. This is not a bad thing. Shiro, you? Amada Shiro did not explain further. After Easy 8 slowly squatted down, he reached out and picked Aina up. He then jumped and landed on the ground full of ruins. Shiro, your injury? Amada Shiro's sudden action shocked Aina. In the battle just now, Amada Shiro's back suffered a large area of burns. No, Aina. Don't worry. These small injuries are not much of a problem anymore. While Shiro Amada was comforting Aina, the long-toothed lion Shunida also walked over. Captain Amada, this weapon doesn't belong to the Federation, right? Similarly, it can't belong to Gion. When Rei Minkai walked out of Shunida's cockpit, he immediately recognized the heavy particle cannon in Easy 8's hand. It was the weapon that shot the two beams that penetrated Apsila's 3's armor. Yes. This is not the Federation's weapon, nor is it Gion's weapon. Amada Shiro nodded and then smiled at Rei Minkai. Nice to meet you. The new Inspector Rei Minkai. I'm Amada Shiro. As soon as he opened his mouth, Rei Minkai felt an inexplicable sense of strangeness from the Amada Shiro in front of him. It was as if the Amada Shiro in front of him was not the Amada Shiro he knew, but a senior general who had been in a high position for a long time, controlling tens of thousands of warships and dominating the battlefield. You! Rei Minkai frowned and took half a step back, blocking in front of the long-toothed lion, Shunida. The long-fanged lion, Shunida, also closed its mouth that was biting the shard, revealing a guarded expression. Haha! Don't be so nervous. If my appearance disturbs you, then we can talk to someone else. Nami, I'll leave it to you. Amada Shiro laughed and then waved his hand. A woman wearing a black military uniform with a purple ribbon on her collar walked out from behind the ruins at the side and quickly walked 5 steps in front of Rei Minkai. Nice to meet you. Inspector Rei Minkai. I'm the intelligence officer of the 5th Fleet, Amada Nami. You are? What's with your appearance? The appearance of this woman made Aina, who was already confused, fall into an even more incomprehensible doubt. Because this woman who called herself Amada Nami's appearance was almost exactly the same as Aina Sakhaline, as if they were printed out from the same mold. The only difference was that Amada Nami had a heroic spirit that Aina Sakhaline did not have between her brows. Nice to meet you. My mother in this world, Isa Sakhaline. According to the timeline, I might be the child that you and my father, Amada Shiro, gave birth to in the future. As soon as the words came out, it shocked everyone. What's going on? Time travel? Rei Minkai was also extremely shocked. Yes and no. The world that we are in now is not a normal world. It's a world called the space-time singularity. In here, everything that exists is obviously different from the world that you are familiar with. The past, present, and future will all become chaotic in this singularity. And the cause of this phenomenon is this. Amada Nami glanced at Rei Minkai, raised her hand and pointed at the shard that Shunida was biting. The target that you are pursuing, the shard that was produced when the world collapsed. Chapter 332. World Fragment. Space-time singularity? The words from Amada Nami's mouth gave Rei Minkai a sense of déjà vu, but before he could react from his thoughts, there was a movement next to him. Tion. Amada Nami? My Shiro's daughter? In the previous battle, Aina, who had experienced life and death, was now attracted by Amada Nami's frank admission of her identity. In the end, this might be a normal reaction. No matter who it was, when they suddenly saw someone who looked only a few years younger than them claiming to be their own child, they would certainly not be able to react in the first moment, and even subconsciously deny the other party's claim. However, before Aina could ask Amada Nami what was going on, she fainted in someone's arms. Sorry, Aina. Perhaps this fact is a very shocking thing for you. But I believe you will accept it. After all, the other Aina Sakhaline are the same. Shiro Amada gently hugged Aina and turned to look at Amada Nami. Nami, I'll leave this to you. Now, there are more important things that I need to deal with. Yes, Father. Amada Nami saluted. Then, Shiro Amada turned his head and looked at Norris, whose face was full of vigilance, but he did not come forward to stop him. Norris, if there is a chance in the future, I hope to talk to you. How about it? Norris was silent for a moment. Since coming here, Norris had been silent, deliberately controlling his sense of existence, so that he could calmly observe the development of things from a bystander's perspective. Lei Minkai, the Long Fong Lion's Zero Style, Amada Nami, and even the Amada Shiro, in Shiro Amada's body made Norris unable to accept the things in front of him. I hope so too. So, how should I address you? Shiro Amada? Norris finally asked slowly. You can just call me Shiro. Whether it is him or me, we are all Shiro Amada. It's just that the world we were born in is not the same. Then, Amata Shiro said in a low voice, I'll leave the rest to you. In this world, no matter what your decision is, we will understand and accept your choice. As soon as he finished speaking, in everyone's perception, something seemed to suddenly flow out of Shiro Amada's body. The feeling that Rei Minkai was familiar with also quietly returned. Shiro Amada was still Shiro Amada. Amada Nami. This is the functions of the latest spiritual skeleton. It was able to project the spirit of a new type pilot, whose spirit had reached a certain level, into a specific world. However, the conditions to achieve this were extremely harsh. In our Qin army, only the army commander and the other 3 generals can do it. Nami Amada didn't keep the fact that Shiro Amada became Shiro Amada a secret. Instead, she bluntly told the truth to Rei Minkai. And your father is one of the 3 generals? The spiritual skeleton in Rei Minkai's memory did not have the magical ability that Nami Amada described. However, after thinking about it carefully, Rei Minkai felt that the appearance of this magical ability was not too magical. After all, in Rei Minkai's memory, there was a work that described the spiritual skeleton even more magical. That was the Mech Warrior Gao Denti. This work might have been an extension of the Unicorn Gao Da's success. In terms of setting and plot, it was based on the abilities of the spiritual skeleton. Its performance was more detailed and bolder. Rei Minkai remembered that in the battle, the fully activated Phoenix Gao Da could even go back in time for a short period of time. Although it would be blocked by the I-Force field. However, if this ability was strengthened and expanded, it was indeed possible to achieve the magical ability that Nami Amada described. No. However, Nami Amada shook her head. Father is not one of the 3 generals. It was only because of the uniqueness of this world that Father was able to use the spiritual skeleton's ability to establish a spiritual link with Shiro Amada of this world. I see. One problem was solved, but there were still other problems waiting to be solved. Then, what's with the space-time singularity? Let's talk about it when we get back. Right now, we still have some things to deal with. Nami Amada smiled slightly and did not have the intention to continue speaking. She only raised her hand and pressed on her wristwatch. Then, she turned around and looked at Norris and Shiro Amada, who had already recovered. Grandpa Norris and... You can call me Shiro. Nami. Shiro Amada took the lead and spoke to help Nami Amada out of the situation. After all, they had a close relationship. However, due to the difference in the world, it was not appropriate for them to address each other as father and daughter. All right. Shiro and Aina, please follow me. The injuries on your bodies need to be treated immediately. The battlefield here can be left to our professionals to take care of. Don't worry. The Federation of this world is not paying attention to the battlefield here. Even the Mechanical Hybrid Brigade will not be paying attention to the situation here in a short period of time. As Nami Amada spoke, a gust of wind suddenly rose. Then, a stream of light flashed past. It was a transport aircraft with a jet engine that slowly changed from a horizontal state to a vertical state. It slowly landed behind Nami Amada. Everyone, please come with me. Inspector Rei Minkai, you too. Questions about you will be answered later. The world fragment, the space-time singularity, and even the Miss Q that you had a fierce battle with before. These questions can be answered for you. Ray Minkai turned around and glanced at the Tusk Lion Zero. The latter flashed with white light and turned back into the White Cat Zero. It was still biting the fragment in its mouth, and had no intention of letting go. This scene caused Shiro Amada and Norris to reveal shocked expressions. Norris was naturally not surprised. In his world view, there was no such thing as a gigantic steel lion turning back into a cute kitten in the blink of an eye. Shiro Amada could not believe that such a miraculous thing could happen in this world. Even if, in the spiritual exchange between the two Shiro Amada, he learned some things from the general with the same name. Let's go, everyone. After holding the White Cat Zero in his arms, Ray Minkai nodded at Shiro Amada and Norris, indicating for them to follow. In the roar of the transport aircraft, the group slowly rose into the sky and flew towards the destination mentioned by Nami Amada. Pada! The sound of high heels stepping on the ground was ear-piercing. Just like its owner's unwillingness at the moment, the steel plates on the ground were stepped on fiercely, leaving small holes in them. Miss Q. Even if you step on the floor, you will not be able to redeem your failure. In the shadows, a voice with a hint of ridicule slowly sounded. At the same time, a face with white foundation and a slightly scary smile appeared in front of the woman. Mr. J. I didn't expect that you, who had been running around all day, would have the time to look for me. You really surprised me. Miss Q's eyes that were originally filled with resentment suddenly changed, flashing with a light that only appeared when she saw something interesting. No, Mississippi. I'm just trying to fulfill our long-cherished wish. Now, the purpose of my visit is to inform you that soon, our new Mr. K will make an appearance at the meeting of all the final counselors. Miss Q, please be sure to attend. Mr. bowed slightly, performed a gentlemanly salute to Miss Q, and slowly stated his purpose of visit. Mr. K? A new one? What happened to the original Mr. K? Was he defeated? Miss Q frowned slightly. In the organization, people with the titles of Mr. and Miss were not people who fished for fame. Every person with the title of Mr. and Miss more or less had the means to fight against the world alone. But such an existence would actually undergo a change in iterations? Yes. The previous Mr. K has been killed. No. According to the current meaning, Mr. K hasn't been killed, it's just that Mr. K has been replaced by Mr. K. Mr. J's face that was covered with white foundation frowned slightly, almost squeezing into a flower, and said something that was rather tongue-twisting. Although it was a tongue-twister, Miss Q understood what Mr. J meant. The original Mr. K was dead. The one who killed him was the other Mr. K in the many parallel world. After all, Miss Q had experienced this before, but it was not as frequent as Mr. K. Also, Miss Q knew why Mr. K did this. The purpose was none other than to prove one of Dr. Zisali's research. Judging from Mr. J's reaction, there seemed to be new developments in this research. I understand. Then, I'll return to the headquarters after I finish what I'm doing. Mr. J. Figuring it out was one thing, but whether or not he would return immediately was another matter altogether. Miss Q, who was dissatisfied with the previous failure, did not want to go back empty-handed. Mr. J saw Miss Q's dissatisfaction with a glance. Mr. J, who knew every member's plan like the back of his hand, noticed that there was no loot behind Miss Q. It was the Apsilas 3 that had been parasitized by skeleton fusion. However, Mr. J did not intend to pursue this matter. Instead, he bowed again. I've already delivered the message. Miss Q, then I'll take my leave first. Also, before I leave, I think there's a piece of information that I must inform you of. Miss Q was very satisfied with Mr. J's initiative to leave. Moreover, Miss Q was relieved that he did not harass her about the failure of her plan. Once this guy named Mr. J became entangled, he was an extremely annoying existence. What news? Miss Q raised her eyes and looked at Mr. J's pale face. The fleet. The legendary fleet seems to have started moving. Perhaps some of us will become its prey. The smile on Mr. J's face was still playful, as if the information he was talking about had nothing to do with him. The legendary fleet? Miss Q narrowed her eyes slightly and said subconsciously, "Is it the fleet commanded by the one known as the Pioneer?" Yes. Although our current strength is very strong, we can't threaten this legendary fleet. Fortunately, it's now the active period of the Abyss. Perhaps we can use the already active Abyss to speed up the completion of our plan. Mr. J chuckled, and his pale face became even scarier. Relying on the cover of the Abyss? That's true. We, a group of pitiful creatures lost in the multiverse, can only rely on the existence of the Abyss to fulfill our long-cherished wish. Miss Q raised her head slightly and looked at the deep and endless darkness above her head. Everything will be for the sake of fulfilling our long-cherished wish. Mr. J bowed again and saluted the endless darkness. Then Miss Q, I look forward to seeing you again at the inevitable council. Goodbye. The darkness surged like a tide, and Mr. J's pale face disappeared into the endless darkness, leaving Miss Q standing alone in this empty space. Our actions have attracted the attention of the pioneers? Miss Q's whisper gradually sounded. Since the founding of the final counselor, countless worlds had been destroyed by their hands. Or, before this news came, they could use the fact that the Abyss was active as a cover. But now, this boundary had been broken. Perhaps the appearance of the Steel Lion was not a coincidence. Perhaps it was a counterattack from the many destroyed worlds. Is that so? If it's just a counterattack, it won't be able to stop us from fulfilling our long-cherished wish. Steel Lion, I'll wait for you. Miss Q raised her hand and snapped her fingers, then disappeared into the portal that opened up. At the same time, Ray Minkai also received the information he wanted to know. Based on the above, according to the analysis of the information collected by our Army's intelligence department, the group that is currently operating in the dark and destroying many worlds should be an organization called the Inevitable Council. The holographic screen lit up behind Amada Nami, and the information was constantly changing. In addition, our intelligence personnel paid a heavy price to obtain the information about the people related to this organization. Mr. K, Miss Q, and Mr. J? Mr. K naturally did not need to say anything. That was how Lei Minkai found out who Mr. K really was. That was Lu Luciovi, Britannia from another parallel world. Miss Q was the existence that he had fought with not long ago, and was even the murderer that destroyed Soth's mechanical beast. As for Mr. J, it was the first time Ray Minkai heard this name. Not to mention, the White Cat State Zero was still biting on the world fragment and did not let go at all. Now, other than raising its eyes from time to glance at the information given by Amada Nami, the White Cat State Zero put all its attention on the world fragment. Yes. I don't need to introduce Mr. K and Miss Q. According to the administration's resume about you, other than fighting with Miss Q, you also came into contact with Mr. K. Therefore, these two people can be skipped. Amada Nami paused, raised her hand and pointed at the name called Mr. J. She said, "As for this Mr. J, other than this name, we know nothing about him." What? Other than the name, you know nothing about him? Ray Minkai was stunned and asked in disbelief. Yes. Although it's embarrassing to say it, it's also the truth. The name Mr. J was discovered by our intelligence personnel by chance. Amada Nami sighed and continued. Therefore, one of the goals of our fleet this time is to find out as much information as possible about this being named MRJ. This is also the reason why we are here. Is that so? So it's just a coincidence. I thought it was Captain Hudson and the others who sent you here to support me. To be honest, Captain Hudson did send us a distress signal, so this is not entirely a coincidence. Amada Nami smiled and moved her finger. The holographic projection screen behind her changed again. Sir Inspector, you now have a new mission. Is it the next world? Ray Minkai remembered what Hudson had told him before entering World 08 MS. Yes. The space-time singularity that appeared this time is not a single phenomenon. Sir Inspector, although you've already dealt with the singularity of this world, according to our intelligence, the escaped Miss Q may have other backup plans. Now, it's up to your lion to bite this cunning fox. Roar. Kai. Go. Hearing Miss Q's next move, the white cat State Zero swallowed the fragment in one breath and let out a roar. Then, what's the next world? Don't worry. According to our intelligence, the enemy of the next singularity should not make your Lancelot feel small. Chapter 333. The cold wind rustled as it was crushed by the heavy snow. The bent trees made the endless snowfield seem even more deathly still. Right now, it was the fiercest day of winter. It was also the 7th day since Lei Minkai and State Zero came to this ice field that was covered with white snow and countless withered branches in the winter. Hey, Kai. How long do we have to wait here? The snow-white fur blended perfectly with the color of the ice field. If it weren't for the pair of golden eyes, Ray Minkai might have lost sight of his partner, White Cat State Zero, when he wasn't paying attention. Wait a little longer. We've been here for a week. A few more days won't make a difference. What's more, Amada Nami has already prepared everything for us. According to the current material reserves, even if we stay in this ice field for 3 months, we won't fall to the point where we need to ask for help. Ray Minkai put down the binoculars in his hand and couldn't help but think of the information provided by Amada Nami a week ago when he decided to continue to participate in the mission to track Miss Q. What Ray Minkai didn't expect was that the world that Amada Nami said would not make Lancelot feel small was the Metal Frenzy world that Ray Minkai was very familiar with. Lei Minkai couldn't help but sigh at such a coincidence. At the same time, he was secretly glad that Lancelot was still able to continue fighting. In the previous battle with Apsaras III, Ray Minkai realized that Lancelot was showing signs of weakness. Although its radiation shield was still tough, Lancelot's sword had already encountered a wall that could not be split open. If this continued, not only would Lancelot be unable to effectively harm the enemy, but Ray Minkai would also have to use the tusked Lion State Zero as a normal battle mech. But in this way, Ray Minkai and White Cat State Zero's target would become bigger and bigger. Ray Minkai had reason to believe that after the last battle, Miss must be hiding somewhere and planning the next move to target the tusked Lion State Zero. Or Miss did not put the tusked Lion State Zero in her eyes. However, these were only Ray Minkai's own speculations. There was no evidence to prove it. Therefore, the only thing that could be done now was to follow the plan and try to find traces of Miss in this world. Although Ray Minkai did not have much hope, Amada Nami had a lot of confidence in Ray Minkai and the White Cat State Zero's luck. Don't worry, Mr. Inspector Lei. According to the report we got from a source, you and your kitten have a deviation rate to some extent. Perhaps, with the help of this deviation rate, you can help us find the key to the fog that we have been unable to see through. What did deviation rate mean? Ray Minkai did not know, but he could hear from Amada Nami's tone that he seemed to be a troublemaker. Could it be that even if he sat at home, a big pot would fall from the sky? The cold wind was still whistling, and the dead silence still shrouded this barren ice field. Even if Ray Minkai had thousands of thoughts, he could not affect this dead silence. Until, Kai. There's a situation. White Cat State Zero, who was lying lazily on a pile of snow, turned over, straightened its upper body, and looked at the depths of the ice field where the cold wind was whistling. Ray Minkai listened carefully, and carefully distinguished the noise mixed in the whistling cold wind. After a long time, Ray Minkai's eyes flashed. It's the sound of an engine, and it seems to be the sound of an armed helicopter. State Zero, we have work to do. Roar! In the next second, the cold wind rolled up the snow, and Ray Minkai and the White Cat State Zero's figures were completely covered in this gust of wind. Woo woo woo, the hiss of the car engine echoed on the barren ice field. Amidst the hiss of the engine, the black shadow of the car was also quickly shuttling through this dead silent forest. Hua hua bang! Although the snow field under the wheels looked flat, in fact, there were many hidden potholes. If it wasn't for the fact that the driver of the off-road Jeep was an expert, the Jeep wouldn't have been able to move even an inch. Amidst the bumpy ride, the red-haired girl in tattered clothes sat in the front passenger seat. She had a nervous expression and bit her finger that had been bitten and was bleeding. She didn't seem to feel any pain at all. The look on her face made the driver's heart ache. Not long ago, the driver and his partner rescued this unfortunate girl from a secret research institute, but unfortunately, they were discovered by the enemy and ended up in this forest running around. Stop biting your finger! The driver could not bear it and finally opened his mouth to scold her. However, the girl only responded to the driver's scolding with a dull expression. Let me bite. Otherwise, let me die. As soon as this sentence came out, the girl kept repeating several times, and once again opened her mouth to bite her thumb. Hey! Shut up! Ka! Woo! Amidst the sound of bones being crushed, it was the driver's painful groan. It turned out that when the girl was about to bite her thumb, the driver, who could no longer watch, reached out and pressed the girl's hand. As a result, his palm was fiercely bitten by the girl. However, such an accident made the driver secretly heave a sigh of relief. I didn't think that those guys would do such a cruel thing to you. But at least, he stopped the girl's self-harming behavior. Moreover, after this, the rugged mountain road in front of them seemed to have come to an end. Look, it's the mountain area. We can go home. The shadow of the mountains that appeared in front of them was not a signal for the driver and the girl to escape from the suffering. Instead, it became a sign of death. In the night sky where the cold wind blew, the roar of the missile launch suppressed the sound of the cold wind at this moment. When the wired guidance reached its limit, it passed over the off-road Jeep and suddenly exploded in front of it. Boom! The powerful torrent of flames set off by the explosion of the missile rushed face-to-face toward the off-road Jeep and in the next moment, mercilessly sent the speeding off-road Jeep into the air. Boom! In the violent explosion, a slender figure weakly flew out of the Jeep's window and fell heavily on the snow like a kite with a broken string. Fortunately, the place where the slender figure fell was thick enough snow as a buffer, so she was lucky enough to escape the disaster. However, the driver who rescued the girl was not so lucky. When the Jeep was sent flying by the explosion, the kind-hearted driver only had time to take out the information disk about the Secret Research Institute before the Jeep rolled and fell to the ground, dead. The cold and the sharp pain made the girl sit up from the snow with difficulty. Then, driven by instinct, the girl slowly walked to the side of the broken Jeep and took the disc from the dead driver. However, before the girl had time to remember the contents of the disc, the sound of an engine came from the night sky again. It was a helicopter gunship. The helicopter gunship that blew up the Jeep roared in the gusts of wind and slowly landed behind the girl. Its pilot looked at the girl's long hair that kept flying in the bone-chilling wind and revealed a sinister smile. Then, without hesitation, he pulled the trigger. Vroom vroom vroom. The four-barreled Gatling gun installed under the nose of the armed helicopter let out a terrifying roar and fired a barrage of bullets. In the midst of the barrage of bullets, the broken Jeep exploded in a flash, and in the blink of an eye, the Jeep exploded with a loud bang. The strong shockwave set off by the explosion lifted the girl, who stood still in the same place. After powerlessly tumbling a few times in the air, she fell heavily on the snow again. However, the young girl's pitiful state did not arouse the pity of the military helicopter pilot. Instead, looking at the young girl's increasingly fearful face amidst the gunfire, the pilot's warped heart actually received a great deal of joy. Therefore, the trigger was still held down and pressed rhythmically. Under the deliberate control of the pilot, the bullets whizzed through the snow around the girl, creating deep holes in the snow. The thick snow was blown into the air and scattered on the girl's body under the fire of the gun barrel. In the midst of the gunfire and the snow, the girl's survival instinct made her struggle, but it was useless. The struggling girl at this moment was just a toy for the pilot who had turned into a devil. In the midst of the gunfire, a green light vaguely flashed across the night sky above her head. And this scene flashed across the girl's lifeless eyes. Then, the frightening flashing red light and the shrill fire control radar alarm pulled the attention of the helicopter pilot back. However, when the pilot subconsciously controlled the helicopter to turn and look at the location of the fire control radar alarm, a black shadow suddenly swept out from the dark forest and accurately hit the tail of the helicopter. Pa! Squeak! At the same time as the sound of steel being torn apart reached the girl's ears, a red light followed. Under the girl's gaze, the red light descended from the sky and directly cut the helicopter into two halves. The helicopter had lost control of its tail and was now in a state of chaos. Zap! The red light flashed, and the helicopter suddenly exploded. But at the moment when the helicopter exploded, the girl suddenly felt a warm wind behind her. At the same time, a pair of beautiful fluorescent green light wings and a pair of platinum steel hands painted with gorgeous patterns firmly protected her. Until the explosion of the helicopter came to an end, only the burning wreckage was left. Staring blankly at the wreckage of the helicopter engulfed in flames, the girl suddenly turned around and looked back. The next moment, what appeared in front of the girl was a white body that looked like a medieval knight, but the body was painted with a variety of gorgeous patterns. What caught the girl's attention the most was the pair of fluorescent green light wings that slowly folded behind the white body. Gotcha! The cockpit of the white body opened. A young man wearing a white driving suit with lion patterns embroidered on the shoulders and chest lightly landed on the snow and slowly came in front of the girl. Don't worry. Now you're safe, Mira. Humanoid mobile weapon AS? The girl's eyes did not seem to fall on the young man, but fell on the white body behind him. No, Mira. This is not as. This is Nightmare, the 7th-generation Nightmare, Lancelot. The girl's muttering did not escape the young man's ears, but he did not care about the girl's mistake of mistaking Lancelot as an as. Instead, the young man extended his right hand and invited the girl. Come, Mira. Now you're safe. No one will be able to hurt you anymore. In the name of the Britannia Empire. BR Britannia Empire? Who are you? The girl seemed to have never heard of the empire that the young man mentioned. So, she subconsciously asked a question. I'm Ray Minkai. Mira, remember, my name is Ray Minkai. The young man softly said his name, but the girl was already under the influence of the overload caused by hunger and cold, as well as the overload caused by the chase, and her eyes turned black and she fainted. State 0, let's go. The young man gently carried the girl and looked back at the white body that he called Lancelot. Half an hour later, when the flames on the jeep and the military helicopter's wreckage were about to extinguish, 3 huge figures suddenly appeared from the void, and looked back and forth at the area that had become quiet again. They were the latest model of Mithril's main force AS, M9. Confirmed the battle area. But no enemies were found, not even the target. A calm but somewhat immature voice came from the humanoid mobile weapon M9 on the right. It's the same on my side. No matter how I look at it, there's not a single enemy around. It's as if the enemies in this area have already been dealt with before we arrive. A slightly cynical male voice came through the communication channel. Yes. Very likely. Continue searching. After half an hour, if we still can't find any useful clues, we will immediately retreat from this area. Also, Wilbur, inform the son of the Dan slave to be prepared. Perhaps before we arrived there really was another group of people who intercepted us. A female voice came from the M9 that had been standing in the leader's position. She was the captain of the M9 school team, Mao Melissa. Yes, Sister Mao. Do it now. The M9 that was hiding in the sniper position immediately sent an emergency message to the mothership at the rear, the son of the Dan slave. What? Someone beat us to the punch and snatched the target? In the deep sea, a very soft voice exclaimed. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.